A sealed proceeding occurred prior to today's proceedings.
All right, let's get the witness.
Witness entering.
Good morning, Ms. Westerhout. You are reminded that you are still under oath.
Yes.
All right, let's get the jury, please.
All rise. Jury entering.
Please be seated.
Will both parties stipulate that all jurors present and properly seated?
Yes.
Yes.
Good morning, jurors. Welcome back.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good morning.
Good morning.
We spoke a little yesterday about the travel schedule. Do you recall that? Or, I'm sorry, withdrawn, we spoke a little bit yesterday about the campaign.
Yes.
And you were working on the RNC hearing, right?
Yes.
What is the RNC?
The Republican National Committee.
And there came a point where President Trump won the Republican nomination, right?
Yes.
And after that, am I correct that the RNC and the campaign worked extremely closely together?
Yes.
Because at that point, President Trump is the presumptive Republic. Is the Republican nominee, and the RNC wants, just like the campaign wants, to get him nominated, right?
Absolutely. Yes.
So you guys were basically one unit, right?
That's right.
And am I correct that every day the TNC and the campaign would jointly create a travel schedule or document that there was a travel schedule for the president?
Whenever the president-elect was traveling, yes,
And it would. So it included everything that he was going to be doing on that day, correct?
Yes.
And I want to show you and the prosecutors what has been marked as L Defendants Exhibit L8 and L9. I apologize. I might not have set this up. Your Honor, if it's okay, I will come back to it.
Yes, of course.
We will come back to that. So I want you to look then at People's Exhibit 69 in evidence. And the prosecutor asked you about this on direct. Do you recall that?
Yes.
And Rona Graff gave you this list, right?
Yes.
And that was the list of contacts that Rona Graff said that prior to the time that President Trump became president, that these were contacts he used in his business, right?
That's right.
And these are people that were personal friends and also business acquaintances, that he worked with, right?
That's right.
And that's what Rona Graff created for you?
Yes.
But there were many people on that list, and to your understanding is that these were people that President Trump spoke to a lot before he became president, right?
Spoke to before he became president, or might be interested in speaking to invite them to the White House or something.
And there were many people on that list who never called the Oval Office, right?
Many, yes.
And to the best of your knowledge, there were many people on that list that President Trump never called while he was in the Oval Office, right?
That's correct.
And I want to turn to People's Exhibit 70, which is an email from you to Rona Graff. And you sent that to Rona Graff, right?
Yes.
And you were asking whether she could pass on a newspaper clipping, right?
Yes.
And if you turn to the next page, there is that newspaper clipping, right?
Yes.
And if we could blow up the top part, it's a picture of the president the first time he boarded Air Force One, right?
Yes.
Kind of an exciting thing, right?
Exciting, yeah.
And he sent it to his family?
Uh-huh.
Right?
Yes.
Did he send that to a lot of people?
Yeah, uh-huh.
He was proud?
He was proud, yeah.
And he would write a little note to the people on it, right?
Uh-huh, yes.
And that was something that President Trump did a lot.
Yes.
Sending newspaper clippings, right?
Yes, quite often.
And in fact, you probably saw him do this thousands of times, right?
Yes.
He would send newspaper clippings of something that happened to people that he knew, right?
That's right.
And he would write a little note on them, right?
Yeah.
So once he sent one to Alan Weisselberg, right?
That's right.
Like thousands of times he sent them to other people, right?
Yes.
And you were asked on many. And so when you were asked on direct, you were asked the question whether it was not unusual for him to have sent this newspaper clipping. Do you recall that?
Uh-huh, yes.
What you meant by that was it wasn't unusual for him to send them to everybody newspaper clippings, right?
That's right.
But with respect to sending them to Alan Weisselberg, do you recall what happened other times?
Not that I can recall, no.
This might have been the only time that he was president that he sent something like this to Alan Weisselberg, right?
It could have been, yes.
And you were asked if you spoke to Alan Weisselberg during when he was president. Do you recall that about checks?
Yes.
And am I correct that you do not have any specific recollection of Alan Weisselberg and the president and President Trump speaking during the first year that President Trump was in office?
That's correct, yes.
And you have a vague recollection that at some point they might have spoken about a check.
Yes, vaguely, uh-huh.
But you're not even sure that that's true, right?
No.
And in fact, you really don't recall any calls specifically between him and Alan Weisselberg, right?
No, he spoke to so many people.
And I want to turn back to, I think we're ready to look at L8 and L9 for the witness and the parties only.
Your Honor, we object to this and we ask to approach.
Sure.
At sidebar.
Yes, I'm happy to get to see you all so much.
We have several papers with this exhibit. I broke this again, Judge. I'm sorry. I think maybe some glue. I'm going to bring some glue.
Good idea.
I think that there are several with this, first of all. And I think that this is unlike some of the exhibits that the defense used on cross-examination because they were responsive. This is totally outside of the scope of the direct. And this is exactly the problem that we identified at the beginning of this trial, which is that they hadn't designated any exhibits, and that Your Honor had precluded any exhibits that directed, case-in-chief exhibits that were not designated by the following day. They didn't designate any. So, and we specifically raised the specter of the defense trying to make our witnesses their own and backdoor that preclusion by trying to put in non-responsive exhibits, which are really case-in-chief exhibits, under the guise that this is cross-examination. Now, this is fully beyond the scope of the direct examination. We didn't ask a single question about the president's travel schedule or the president-elect's travel schedule. And to top it all off, these travel schedule exhibits are from October. She testified she wasn't even there at Trump Tower or working with the defendant until after Election Day. So this should be precluded, this entire area.
I would just add to that she also never testified that she worked on the travel schedule. She said that she scheduled things in Trump Tower.
Ms. Nichelles, what's the purpose of this?
So, Your Honor, we are just putting it in evidence. We are not going through them. She testified on direct about his schedule, and they have been talking about his schedule. We just are interested in what happens, actually, on one of those days, October 26th. And this is a document that was created jointly by the campaign and the RNC. She was working at the RNC that day. She received these documents every day at the RNC. On those days, she received these every day when she was working, and they were made and kept in the ordinary course of business.
What's the purpose of this?
It is to show what he was doing on that one day.
Why?
On October 26th. Because it's an issue in this trial in terms of the people are putting in phone documents about it, about what happened, his conversations with Michael Cohen, and this explains what he was doing with Cohen. It's one document, Your Honor.
I appreciate that, but...
Yes.
Why don't you just ask her about that day?
What's the people's objection to this document?
Why don't you just ask? Do you know? Do you know what Donald Trump was doing on October 26th?
She doesn't recall.
She doesn't?
Your Honor, but the business records can establish it, and she can establish this as a business record.
She was there at the time?
Yes, she was there at the time. She worked for the RNC.
Who created this?
The RNC and the campaign jointly created it.
She didn't say that.
She will. I haven't been able to ask her questions about it yet.
You are getting close.
Yes, I haven't been able to ask her about this yet. We weren't able to put it up on the screen. I was about to establish a business record foundation. That's what I'm doing, what I was going to do right now.
This is exactly the problem. We did not ask a single question about scheduling or the work that she did prior to the election. Ms. Nichelles asked about scheduling and meetings in January. But this door is not opened. This is vintage and an end run around Your Honor's ruling, and it should not be countenance.
Judge, I have to say also, these documents are not like a surprise to the people. They came to us in discovery. It's not like I'm showing documents that they have never seen before.
But the issue is whether you intended to put them in all along.
I actually just thought about this last night. We never intended to put it in before. I thought of this last night. I never thought of putting it in before then.
You need to lay a rock-solid foundation. If you can even lay the foundation for this, then I will allow it. But if you are unable to, then it's not coming.
Those are ours, thanks.
Sidebar concluded.
Ms. Westerhout, do you recognize that document in front of you?
I do, yes.
And is that a travel schedule that was created by the Trump campaign and the RNC jointly?
It appears to be, yes.
And were those travel schedules created every day that President Trump was traveling during the campaign?
Yes.
And were they shared with the RNC and the campaign?
I believe so, yes.
And you were working at the RNC at that point, am I correct?
Yes.
And would you receive these travel schedules?
I don't believe I personally received them.
But would you see them?
Probably, yes.
And you saw them during the course of when you were working at the RNC, right?
Yes.
And when you say probably, you are not sure whether you saw these exact ones, correct?
That's right, uh-huh.
But you saw the travel schedules on a regular basis, right?
Uh-huh, yeah.
And you knew that they were created in the ordinary course of business of the RNC and the campaign, correct?
Yes.
And you knew that they were kept in the ordinary course of business of the RNC and the campaign, right?
That's right.
And it was the ordinary course of business for the RNC and the campaign jointly to create and keep these records, correct?
Yes.
I offer them in evidence, Your Honor.
May I voir dire, Your Honor?
Yes.
Ms. Westerhout, do you have any specific recollection of seeing these documents?
Yes.
These particular documents in front of you?
Yes, my lawyer showed it to me.
But
I'm sorry.
during, contemporaneously with the underlying events in October of 2016, do you have an independent recollection of receiving these personally?
No.
When did your lawyer have you review these? And please, when you answer, don't go into any discussion that you had with your lawyer.
This morning.
We object.
Please approach.
At sidebar.
So the people called this witness, right? I don't know how they got them this morning. How did they get them this morning?
I sent them this morning, I called them, and then I sent it this morning.
Because you intended to present it to the witness?
It just happened that I thought of it last night.
And we didn't even get notice of this until the witness was on the stand in the middle of questions. I mean, this is just sandbagging.
Judge, I just sent them this morning, and then maybe 10 minutes before I walked in here that I was able to talk to them. She did recognize many of them. She said it. This is really a very last-minute thing.
But you were trying to lay a foundation. You already knew that she didn't see this, and you already knew her answer. And this is not even your witness.
Your Honor, of course I did. I tried to present it to her.
This is something that the people asked for months before this trial that you did not give notice of what the exhibits were that you were going to use. So for two reasons, I'm keeping it out. Reason number one, you should have given it to the people. You did not present it to them prior to her testifying. And two, her answers are far from that which she can establish this as a business record. I'm not allowing it in.
Judge, may I respond on one issue? We are getting the flip side of this with exhibits that are being created and sent to us the night before. Judge, they are summarily giving us exhibits in that way.
We can discuss that later.
So it should be reciprocal.
We can discuss that later.
Sidebar concluded.
Okay, thanks. So I want to...
I'm sorry, your motion to introduce this into evidence is denied.
Thank you, Your Honor. I want to turn your attention to the questions that you were asked about checks.
Uh-huh.
All right, and you were asked a lot of questions about how checks were sent. Do you recall that?
Yes.
And I want to show you what is Exhibit 66 in evidence. And that can be shown to everybody. So this is an email chain about addresses, about how to send stuff to the White House, right?
Yes.
And if we can blow up the bottommost part, the bottom entry, thank you. And there were questions being asked about how to, that was John McEntee saying, can you put me in touch with Rebecca because Keith is leaving and checks need to be sent to him, right?
Correct.
Objection.
Overruled.
And that occurred at some point along the lines when you were sending, Keith Schiller was leaving the White House, right?
Yes.
And I want to move a little bit back, and we can take that down. And I want to move a little bit back to the first when you started, when you got to the White House. And you said yesterday you didn't know anything when you got there, right?
No.
You had been working on the transition team, but there was really no transition for you, right?
That's right.
And you walked into the White House and you didn't know how President Trump would get personal items, right?
No, I did not.
And you didn't know how his wife would get personal items, right?
No.
And there was a lot of security about things that get sent to the White House, wasn't there?
Yes.
And that includes checking any mail or items that get received, right?
That's right, uh-huh.
So at some point you were told that there was a post office box that had been set up for the president to get personal items, right?
That's right.
And then it turned out that that was a slow way to receive things, right?
Yes.
And because of the security, correct?
Yes, uh-huh.
And am I correct that it was also slow because things would get lost, right?
Yeah, uh-huh.
And that sometimes you would find out that things had been sent to the White House and that for President Trump personally, and he never received it, right?
Yes, uh-huh.
And President Trump told you that friends of his were feeling that he was being disrespectful to them, right?
Objection.
Sustained.
Well, he was. President Trump was upset that he was not getting personal emails or personal information, personal documents and letters from friends of his, right?
Objection.
Sustained.
Well, wasn't that a problem about getting mail to President Trump through the White House?
Yes.
And President Trump, liked to return calls promptly. You testified yesterday?
Yes.
And you testified yesterday that he felt like it was disrespectful if he didn't return calls promptly, right?
Yes.
Objection.
Overruled.
And so you all tried to figure out a way that he could get his mail promptly, right?
That's right.
And the same for the First Lady, that she could get things promptly, right?
That's right.
And it was the same problem for Ivanka Trump, right? That she could get personal things promptly, right?
I don't have specific knowledge of Ms. Trump, but probably.
And the idea had come up that things would be sent to Keith Schiller.
Yes.
right?
Yes.
And that's how it came to be that Keith Schiller started to receive these checks personally, right?
That's right, yes.
And when Keith Schiller, and he received other mail that was personal for President Trump, right?
Right.
And he also received things that were personal for Melania Trump, right?
Yes.
Melania Trump?
The First Lady, right?
Because the First Lady also had the same problem, right?
Yes.
And then Keith Schiller would bring in these items and give them to you, right?
That's right.
And you would give them to President Trump, right?
Yes.
And when Keith Schiller left, it was transferred to another person that the email got sent that we just saw, right?
Yes.
And then when that other person left, it became your job, right?
That's right.
And that's what this whole testimony about FedEx packages was about, right?
Yes.
It was a way that items could be sent to you and you could get them promptly to President Trump, right?
That's right.
And is it your understanding that this workaround existed in prior administrations as well?
Objection.
Sustained.
Well, wasn't it a new workaround that you all came up with? Was it?
Objection.
Overruled.
Judge, can we approach? Thank you. It wasn't a new workaround that you all came up with, was it? Was it your understanding that this problem with getting items promptly to the President of the United States existed for everybody who is in that office?
Objection.
Overruled.
I don't have any knowledge of what it was like in previous administrations, but I can't imagine it would have been any different.
Now, when you received, just focusing, when you received whatever packages there was, you would give them to President Trump or to the First Lady, correct?
Yes.
And you had nothing to do with giving documents or packages to Ms. Trump, Ivanka Trump?
No,
And do you know how she got them?
I don't.
And you would leave whatever items came for President Trump on his desk, right?
That's right.
And with respect to the checks, they came in a folder, am I correct?
Yes.
And if he had the time when you gave them to him, he would sign them?
Yes. If he had the time and if he was in the office, yes.
And you said he signed a tremendous amount of items, right?
Yes.
And there were proclamations that he was signing?
Yes, commissions, proclamations, executive orders, memos, letters.
And that would take up many hours of his day, right?
Yes.
Because he did not like to have that in printed form, right?
No.
He felt that if someone was getting his signature, they deserved his real signature, right?
Yes, absolutely. Objection.
Sustained.
Move to strike.
And
Move to strike.
Stricken from the record.
And were there times, with all these, would you say it was hundreds of documents that he was signing?
Not every day, but sometimes,
And this was in between other things that he was doing, right?
Oh, yes,
And so would you see him signing things without reviewing them?
Yes.
And would you see him signing checks without reviewing them?
Yes.
And you would see him signing checks while he was on the phone, right?
Yes.
Would you see him signing checks when he was meeting with people?
Yes.
And there were different types of people that he was meeting with, right?
Yes.
Sometimes he was meeting with the top foreign leaders in the world, right?
Yes,
And other times he was meeting with you.
Yeah,
And so he wouldn't be signing the checks when he was meeting with the top people in the world.
Yes.
But maybe when he was meeting with you, talking about something else, he would also be signing documents.
Yes. Talking about the schedule or anything that had been going on.
The chief of staff that he would be meeting with.
Yes.
And other people he would be doing that.
That's right.
He was a person who multitasked, right?
Definitely.
And now I want to ask you about some other items that we are showing. If we could show Exhibit 71, and that's an evidence. People's Exhibit 71, we can show it to everybody. And Madeline Westerhout sent you this, right? Oh, you sent this to her, and it says, Rona, can you help me with this, right?
Yes.
And if we can turn to the next page, it's an invoice, right?
Yes.
And this is a personal expense of President Trump, right?
Right.
And it was sent to you and with the question from Rona, right?
Yes.
And she wanted to know what to do with this, right?
Right.
And in your experience, Rona Graff was very careful about not wanting to spend the president's money without his approval, right?
Yes,
And so she wanted to check with him, right?
Yes.
It's his money, right?
Yes.
And so she would send you this kind of thing and ask him.
Yes.
And he answered it with one word, right?
Right.
Just pay, right?
Right.
Boom, it was off his desk, right?
Right.
Because he was extremely busy, right?
Yes.
And I want to turn your attention now to another exhibit. I'm sorry, I just don't know the exhibit number. People's Exhibit 75. Yes. And do you recall being shown this on Direct? This is a series of emails about President Trump's, about a frame that President Trump wanted.
Yes.
And again, Rona Graff was asking questions about the price of the frame, right?
Right.
And just to be clear, this was President Trump was putting in the credenza in back of where he sat a number of photographs, right?
Yes.
And they were photographs of people who were important to him, right?
Yes, his family.
He had a photograph of his father?
Uh-huh.
He had a photograph of his wife and children, is that correct?
Yes, uh-huh.
And he wanted a photograph of his mother?
Yeah,
And so he wanted a nice frame?
that's right.
And those frames, those photographs, when he would be sitting at the Resolute desk, they would be right behind him, right?
That's right.
And often pictures that were taken would show the photographs behind him, right?
That's right, uh-huh.
And so he was looking for a very nice frame, right?
Yes.
But Ronograph, again, was not comfortable spending the president's money, right?
To my understanding, yes.
And so you said on direct you made an executive decision to just okay this, right?
Yes. I don't remember specifically, but that could have very well been the case.
Because when President Trump was in the White House, you understood he was too busy to be dealing with this kind of thing, right?
Yes.
His life may have been different before when he was just running a major company in the United States, but it was different when he was running the United States, right?
Objection.
Overruled.
That's right.
Now, you were asked some questions about, or you were in the White House, am I correct, when there came? There was a story about Stormy Daniels, right?
That's right.
And you were working with President Trump very closely with him at that point, right?
Yes.
And did there come a time when there was a story about Stormy Daniels in the paper?
Yes.
And did you have a conversation with President Trump about that?
Yes, I did.
And based on that conversation, what was your understanding of his feelings about this story?
That he was very upset by it.
And why?
My understanding is that he knew it would be hurtful to his family.
And that was based on what he said to you. Was that your understanding?
I don't believe he specifically said that, but I could just tell that the whole situation was very unpleasant.
Objection. Move to strike.
Sustained. The answer is stricken.
Well, when you say he didn't specifically say that, he spoke about his family?
Meaning, he didn't specifically speak about his family in that conversation.
Okay. If I may have a moment,
Defense counsel confer.
I have no further questions.
Any redirect?
Yes, Your Honor. Good morning, Ms. Westerhout.
Good morning.
So, on cross-examination, Ms. Nichelles was just asking you about the method of sending checks via FedEx to the White House, right?
Yes.
And you testified that there were certain standard security protocols in place at the White House for normal channels of mail?
Yes.
Was the method of sending checks through FedEx to somebody's personal address an end run around the White House security protocols?
No, not to my understanding, no. It was just a way to get things to him faster.
And they wouldn't go through the typical screening process for mail at the White House, right?
That's right.
Now, you did not meet Mr. Trump for the first time until after the election, right?
That's right.
And was that in November of 2016?
Yes.
And you testified on cross-examination that you really had not spent any time with Mr. Trump until January of 2017, right?
Yes, not a significant amount of time.
And in the period of November 2016 through January 2017, in that transition period, you testified that you worked out of Trump Tower?
Yes.
Did you sit on a different floor from Mr. Trump?
Yes.
And did the RNC leadership in general sit on a different floor from Mr. Trump?
Yes.
On cross-examination, Ms. Nichelles didn't ask you if you had spoken to her before, right?
She did not.
Have you spoken to Ms. Nichelles before?
I have.
How many times?
Once.
And when did you last speak to her?
2 nights ago, Wednesday night.
On cross-examination, you told Ms. Nichelles that Mr. Trump did not freak out about the Access Hollywood tapes, right?
Did I? I don't recall saying that.
The tape came out in October of 2016, right?
Yes.
And you did not meet Mr. Trump until after the election in November of 2016, right?
That's right.
And you didn't spend any real time with him until January 2017, right?
Not a significant amount of time, yes.
So you have no first-hand knowledge about his reaction to the Access Hollywood tape, right?
No first-hand knowledge, no.
And you testified on cross-examination that while serving as president, Mr. Trump signed commissioned proclamations, executive orders, memos, and other documents, right?
Yes.
And it is your testimony that Mr. Trump signed those documents without reviewing them?
Not all of them. But he had people who did that for him that he trusted to prepare documents for his signature. So by the time they got to his desk, it was ready for his signature.
And you testified on direct that you worked at a geopolitical consulting firm?
Yes.
Is that American Global Strategies?
Yes.
And I think you testified that you are the chief of staff for the chairman?
Yes.
Who is the chairman?
Ambassador Robert O'Brien.
Was he President Trump's national security advisor from 2019 to 2021?
Yes, he was.
No further questions.
Any recross?
Yes, Your Honor. You were asked just whether you met with me prior to this?
Yes.
And we met for about an hour?
That's right.
By Zoom the other night?
That's right.
Did you meet with the prosecutor before this?
I did.
How many times?
3.
And when was the most recent time?
Wednesday morning.
And those were for hours?
Yes.
And just to reiterate, President Trump was very close to his family, right?
Yes.
And it was your impression that he was very upset with all?
Objection.
Sustained.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Anything else?
Nothing further, Your Honor.
Thank you. You can step down. People, your next witness?
Judge, the people called Daniel Dixon.
Witness entering. Step to the other officer. Step this way, sir.
Okay.
Step up here. Remain standing. And raise your right hand and face the court clerk. Thank you. Have a seat, please. Just state your first and last name and spell your last name.
Daniel Dixon, Dixon.
And your county of residence?
Broward County, Florida.
Good morning, Mr. Dixon. You may inquire.
Thank you. Mr. Dixon, I'm just going to ask you if you can kind of pull your chair in a little bit and speak into the microphone. Mr. Dixon, are you employed?
Yes.
Where do you work?
At&T.
And what kind of company is At&T?
Telecommunications company.
And what is your job title there?
Lead compliance analyst.
How long have you been a lead compliance analyst?
Roughly 6 to 7 years.
What are some of your duties and responsibilities as a lead compliance officer?
I assist with complying with legal demands. I help analysts query records. And I also help with law enforcement interpreting our records.
In your role at AT&T, have you become familiar with AT&T's record-keeping practices?
Yes.
Do you understand that you are testifying today as a custodian of records for AT&T?
Yes.
Are you here because AT&T received a subpoena?
Yes.
Does AT&T have counsel?
Yes.
Is that counsel here in the courtroom today?
Yes.
Related specifically to its phone business, does AT&T keep subscriber and call detail records?
Yes.
What are call detail records?
Call detail records are the records for usage between a device and another device.
About how long does AT&T retain call detail records?
Generally 3 years.
And when you say communication between a device and another device, is that sort of phone calls between people?
Yes, mobility records.
And could you tell us a little about what subscriber records are?
Subscriber records is the customer information for the account.
Does AT&T make and keep these records in the regular course of its business?
Yes.
Is it the regular course of AT&T's business to make and keep these records?
Yes.
Before testifying today, did you have opportunity to review a thumb drive containing a set of electronic documents?
Yes.
Can I hand the witness a thumb drive? Is that the thumb drive that you reviewed?
Yes.
How do you know?
It has my initials and the date.
And does that thumb drive contain a set of AT&T records that have been marked for identification as People's Exhibit 400?
Yes.
Are the records contained in People's 400 for identification, call detail, and subscriber records?
Yes.
How many different phone numbers do they relate to?
6 numbers that belong to AT&T and 11 numbers that were just on our network for roaming or was in contact with an AT&T number.
Okay, so there are records. Tell me if I get this right. There are records for 17 different phone numbers?
Yes.
Of which 6 belong to customers of AT&T?
Yes.
And the other 11 are just call records that AT&T captured because it used the AT&T system?
Correct.
Were those records for the non-AT&T customer records? Do those call detail records only reflect calls that were transmitted through AT&T cell towers or calls made to or received from an AT&T customer?
Yes.
Do all of these phone records, both the subscriber and the call detail records, relate to the general time period of 2015 to 2018?
Yes.
Did AT&T make and keep this subscriber and call detail records contained in People's 400 for identification in the regular course of its business?
Yes.
Was it the regular course of AT&T's business to make and keep these particular records?
Yes.
Are the entries made on these documents made at the time that the recorded events or transactions took place or within a reasonable time thereafter?
Yes.
Is the data contained in these reports captured through an automated process and stored in an electronic database?
Yes.
Does AT&T rely on the accuracy of that automated process and the access to that database?
Yes.
And can AT&T employee capture data from the electronic database? And are they under a business duty to do so accurately?
Yes.
Judge, at this point, I would offer this as People's 400.
No objection.
People's 400 is accepted into evidence.
And just for the record, this is subject to the sealing order that was dated April 19th.
Okay.
Now, if we could pull up 3 pages from this exhibit that have been redacted. And beginning with page, with Bates stamped Danny GJ, and then 60 and the number 38. Do you recognize this?
Yes.
What is this?
A subscriber report.
Is this a representative sample of an AT&T subscriber record?
Yes.
Do the pages you are viewing on the screen contain redactions?
Yes.
Did you have a chance to compare the redacted pages that we see here to the original pages that are not redacted, but that are in evidence as People's 400?
Yes.
Were the redacted and unredacted pages the same, but for the redactions?
Yes.
I just want to ask you about a few of the boxes in here. What does financially liable party mean?
It's the person responsible for paying the bill.
What is the billing party?
The billing party is where the bill is mailed to.
And if we could pull up the user information?
That's the registered user for the account.
So could it be different? Could the billing party be different from the user information?
Yes.
Why is that?
Because the person who pays the bill is not necessarily the one using the phone number.
Is that something you might often see in a situation where a business gives phones to employees?
Yes.
So the business might be the billing party, but the individual employee who uses the phone might be in the user information.
Yes.
What is the MSISDN?
That's the phone number on the account.
And what does MSISDN active mean?
The date it was active.
So it's sort of a date range?
Yes, a date range.
If we could take that down, and if we could, I want to pull up now an example of call detail records. Do the call detail records within People's Exhibit 400 contain 3 different types of reports?
Yes.
What are those 3 reports?
Mobility, wireline, and international.
Starting with mobility, what is a mobility report?
Mobility is the communication between a mobile and any mobile device and a mobile device to mobile devices.
So a phone call from a cell phone to a cell phone?
Yes.
What is international?
That's when the international network was used to make or help receive a phone call.
And what is wireline?
Wireline is the use of AT&T's wireline side of the network to help make or receive a phone call.
Is that sometimes called hardline?
I'm sorry?
Is that sometimes called hardline, or is that...
Yes, landline.
Landline, sorry, that's what I meant, landline. Is the mobility report further subdivided into different categories of data?
Yes.
And do those include invoice usage, data usage, SMS usage, and SMS email usage?
Yes.
Can you briefly describe what invoice usage means?
Invoice usage shows the transactional logs between phone calls.
What does SMS usage mean?
That also shows the transactional logs between text messages.
Would that include text messages made through encrypted apps?
No.
Do they include iMessages?
No.
Generally speaking, for the 2 iPhone users that are messaging one another, would you expect to see those transactions in the call detail records?
It would be a transaction that's captured in a data session.
In a data session?
A data session, yes.
And what does that mean? Can you explain what that means?
So, on our data records, we show logs of different sessions. Just a length of the session, we are unable to determine what took place during those sessions.
Okay, and actually the next thing we are going to talk about is, what does data usage mean? What are some of the types of activity that would be captured in a data usage report?
Streaming movies, anything related to the internet.
And when you look at a data usage report, do you just see amounts of data that was used, or do you see what that data was used to do?
Only amounts of data being used.
So you have no way of understanding, you just know X amount of data was used, but you don't know if somebody was streaming a movie or iMessaging or something else?
Correct.
Can you briefly tell us what SMS email usage means?
SMS email is just basically a text to or from an email address.
For all of the different types of call detail records you just described, what time zone are AT&T's records recorded in?
UTC.
And what is UTC?
Universal Time Coordinated.
And is that true for all types of AT&T records?
Yes.
If we could now pull up another redacted page from this exhibit, and this page bears bait stamp Danny GJ00002822. Mr. Dixon, is this a representative sample of an AT&T invoice usage record?
Yes.
And I just want to ask you about a few of the columns. That does CON stand for?
Connection.
And what is seizure time?
Seizure time is the moment a person hits call up until the recipient answers the phone.
And are both connection and seizure time in UTC as we just discussed?
Yes, the connection times is a timestamp.
What is ET?
ET is the length of the connection.
And does ET stand for elapsed time?
Elapsed time.
And is that in minutes and seconds?
Yes.
What does originating number and terminating number mean?
That means originating is who made the call. Terminating is who received the call.
Is one single phone call sometimes reflected on more than one row in the call detail records?
Yes.
Could you briefly explain why that is?
So, these reports are used for network and billing purposes. They show the raw records, how that call flows through the network.
So, if it had more than one entry, would that just mean it hit different parts of the network while the call was going on?
Correct.
I have no further questions.
Your witness.
Thank you, Judge.
You may inquire.
Thank you. Good morning, Mr. Dixon. My name's is Emil Bove, and I represent President Trump, who is over here to the left. I just want to talk in a little bit more detail about some of the records we just covered to make sure I understand them.
Okay.
I would like to start with the subscriber record. And Mr. Bernick, if we can bring up the same page that the government had up from Government's Exhibit 400 with Bates ending 038. Can we ask the government to bring up that page? If you can zoom in, please, on the box that has the MSISDN. Thank you. So, Mr. Dixon, in the top left, that is MSISDN, which is the phone number you said?
Yes.
To the right of that cell, it says IMSE. Do you see that?
Yes.
And that stands for International Mobile Subscriber Identity, right?
Yes.
And the IMSI is linked to an AT&T's user account, right?
Well, it's the serial number of a SIM card.
Right. So it is a SIM card that is linked to the AT&T account that we are looking at?
At that time, yes.
And a SIM card can be pulled out of one phone, one device, and put into another, correct?
Yes.
And so this IMSI is not necessarily linked to a particular physical device, right?
Correct. It can be taken out. It's just the serial number of a SIM card.
If we can zoom in on status changes there at the bottom, please. Mr. Dixon, I wanted to ask about the cells that read XMKT move. Do you see that?
Yes.
And that means that that is a cross-market move, right?
I believe so.
That is a situation where the user's account transitions from one account number to another within AT&T's records, right?
Usually, yes.
So here this record indicates that on January 23rd, 2017, this was a cross-market move associated with this Michael Cohen account?
Yes.
And so for the record that we are looking at, this user account, the subscriber information begins January 23rd, 2017.
Can you repeat that?
Because of the cross-market move field that we are looking at, what that suggests is that the subscriber information we are looking at begins on that period.
We would have to look in the other boxes because the status change history only shows changes of the account. So it could have been created before and something took place on January 23rd, 2017.
Right. The account could have been created before and then the phone number transitioned onto this account by a cross-market move?
Possibly.
Do you want to look at a different piece of this page to try to figure that out?
Could you zoom back out? So it was. It would seem as if on January 23rd the number left this account.
And if we can zoom back in on that box, please. Thank you. Do you see that the top two rows, contract accepted and contract acceptance required?
Yes.
What does that indicate?
I am not familiar with it.
Now we can take that down. Thank you. I want to talk a little bit about the AT&T billing records. And those are basically records of calls involving this phone number over AT&T's network, right?
Yes.
And you can't tell from the records themselves who actually spoke, right?
Correct.
And obviously these records don't reflect the contents of the calls, right?
Correct.
And you are familiar with the concept of a pocket dial, right?
Correct.
So it's possible that that could happen. Somebody picks up the phone gets picked up on the other end, but there is no communication, right?
Yes.
In these records, there is a lot of data here, but the data also has limits, right?
It's showing the transactional logs.
Transactional logs meaning the amount of time that the one phone number was connected to the other, right?
Yes.
And also that period of time where the one phone number was dialing the other?
Yes.
And if we can bring up the redacted mobility logs that we were looking at, thank you. You see on the right side there is a column, IMEI on there?
Yes.
That's International Mobile Equipment Identity, right?
Yes.
And that is actually a number that is linked to a physical device, right?
Yes.
So that IMSI travels with a SIM card you pulled out from another phone, right?
Yes.
But on this record, where it says IMEI on it, that is a specific reference to a particular phone, correct?
A device, yes.
There is one unredacted page that I would like to show just the witness judge, if that is all right.
Sure.
So, Mr. Bernick, this is for the parties, the court, and the witness, part of Government Exhibit 400 that ends with Bates 1093, please. And I just want to make sure that I understand the feature column, and so we are going to go through a couple of these, and I'm going over to the table so I can see as well. And so if we could zoom in on the feature column for items 7 and 8 on this page. And Mr. Dixon, while we are doing that, are you familiar with the codes in the feature column?
Yes.
And so do you see where it says NIOP?
Yes.
And that's call number identity presentation, right?
Yes.
Basically an incoming call?
Correct.
And then do you see where it says CFNA?
Yes.
Calling number identity presentation, right?
No, CFNA is call forwarding no answer.
And then the next one is VM voicemail?
Yes.
So, am I understanding this right? That when I see something like this in the feature column, what I am looking at is a call that is dialed and then it goes to voicemail, right?
Yes.
And in the AT&T records, each account has a separate phone number for voicemail, right?
Not each account, but each voicemail magistrate. So, there is another number entailed with voicemail.
Was it voicemail magistrate that you said?
Voicemail box.
And so that an incoming call to the number associated with this account, again, gets forwarded to that voicemail inbox, right?
Yes.
Now, if we can stay on these two rows, items 7 and 8, and if you can zoom in on originating number and terminating number, and so you see here there is a D in parentheses?
Yes.
That stands for dialed, right?
Yes.
And so there is an originating number that dialed that 0114 number, right?
Yes.
And then where you see the F in parentheses,
Yes.
that is the number getting forwarded to the voicemail inbox, correct?
Yes.
And that's what the F means?
Yes.
I have nothing further, Judge.
Any redirect?
I have nothing, Judge. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. You can step down. Would you like to call your next witness?
Yes, Judge. At this time, the people called Jenny Tomalin.
Witness entering. Good morning. Step up. Remain standing, please. Raise your right hand and face the clerk. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you are about to give before this court will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
Thank you. State your full name and spell your last name.
It's Jenny Tomalin, Tomalin.
Your county of residence.
Mercer County.
Good morning. You may inquire.
Good morning, Ms. Tomalin. Are you employed?
Yes, I am.
Where do you work?
Verizon.
What kind of company is Verizon?
We are a telecommunications company.
What is your job title?
I'm a senior analyst in executive relations.
How long have you been in that role?
Since 2017, so 7 years.
And what are your duties and responsibilities in that role?
My duties include appearing in court as a custodian of records to testify to records previously produced in response to subpoenas, court orders, and search warrants.
What did you do at Verizon before you were in that role?
I was a subpoena compliance coordinator of the Verizon Security Assistance Team.
How long have you been at Verizon?
18 years.
And in your time at Verizon, have you become familiar with Verizon's record-keeping practices?
Yes, I have.
And you understand that you are here today testifying as a custodian of records for Verizon?
Yes, I do.
And are you here because Verizon received a subpoena asking for custodian testimony?
Yes, I am.
Relating specifically to its phone business, does Verizon keep subscriber and call records?
Yes, we do.
Generally, what are call records?
Call records for the wireless side are billable incoming and outgoing calls. On the wired line side, call records will be tolls or billable outbound calls.
And what are subscriber records?
Records that contain the financial responsible party for the line of service or account, including any contact information, address, etc.
Does Verizon make and keep subscriber and call records in the regular course of its business?
Yes, we do.
And is it the regular course of Verizon's business to make and keep such records?
Yes, it is.
I am going to ask that the witness be handed a thumb drive. Thank you. Ms. Tomalin, if you take a look at that thumb drive, does that thumb drive contain a set of Verizon records that have been marked for identification as People's Exhibit 401?
Yes, it does.
And before coming to court today, did you have a chance to review the records on that thumb drive?
I did.
And is that the thumb drive you reviewed?
Yes, it is.
How do you know that?
Because I initialed and dated the thumb drive.
Are the records contained in People's 401 for identification on that thumb drive call and subscriber records?
Yes, they are.
How many different phone numbers do they relate to?
12.
Do those phone numbers all belong to Verizon customers?
Yes.
Do all of the phone records, both subscriber and call records, relate to the general time period of 2015 to 2018?
Yes.
Did Verizon make and keep the subscriber and call records contained in People's Exhibit 401 for identification in the regular course of its business?
Yes.
Was it the regular course of Verizon's business to make and keep these particular records?
Yes.
Are the entries made on these documents made at the time of the recorded events or transactions took place, or written a reasonable time thereafter?
Yes.
Is the date contained in these reports captured? I am sorry. Is the data contained in these reports captured through an automated process and stored in the electronic database?
Yes.
Does Verizon rely on the accuracy of that automated process and electronic database?
Yes.
Can Verizon employees run reports that capture data from the electronic database?
Yes.
Are they under a business duty to do so accurately?
Yes.
At this point, I am going to offer People's Exhibit 401 into evidence.
No objection.
It's accepted into evidence.
If we can now pull up. I think I am running a little behind here. If we can pull up a redacted page from one of the call records. Displayed in front of you and for the room is a redacted page from People's 401, which bears the Bates stamp Danny GJ 000-64777. Is this a representative sample of a call record for a Verizon phone number?
Yes, it is.
Does this page that we are looking at contain redactions?
Yes, it does.
Did you have a chance to compare this redacted page to the original page that is part of what's in evidence as People's 401?
Yes, I did.
But for the redactions, are the pages identical?
Yes.
Could you just walk us through the columns on this page and explain what each one is?
Yes. Starting on the left, the date column identifies the date that the call began. The time column identifies the time the call began. The number column will identify the telephone number that the target telephone number was communicating with. The rate and usage type columns identify what portion of a customer's calling plan will be applied to these calls. The origination column identifies the geographical area for which we are billing the target telephone number while making or receiving the telephone call. The destination call logs for FM calls, identified by the home area of the telephone number being called. For incoming calls, it will reflect incoming CL or any other code that is needed with that call. The min column identifies the length of the call in minutes, airtime charges, long distance, other charges, and total. Those three columns identify any financial charges assessed to that call respectively.
Just a couple of quick questions. In the min column, is that minutes?
Yes, it is.
And how does that work? Does it reflect seconds, or does Verizon round in a standard direction?
On the bill, we round up.
And with respect to the time shown for each of those calls, what time zone does Verizon keep its records in?
The time zone should be the time zone for the city and state reflected in the origination column.
So, when we look at the date and time columns together with the origination column, that should tell us the time zone that that call is being reflected in.
Yes.
Thank you. I have no further questions.
You may inquire.
Thank you, Judge. Good morning, Ms. Tomalin.
Good morning.
My name is Emil Bove, and I represent President Trump, who is over here on my left. I want to talk a little lit about the subscriber records that are part of Exhibit 401, if we could.
Yes.
Because they are not redacted, I'm just going to ask.
Sure.
So, Mr. Burnick, this is just for the court, the parties, and the witness. Take a look at the spreadsheet with Bates ending 64591. And Ms. Tomalin, do you see that in column D it says MTN?
Yes.
That's mobile telephone number in Verizon records, right?
Yes.
The phone number linked to the account, correct?
Yes.
And so if you look at cell D3, column D, row 3, that row relates to telephone number ending 5361?
Yes.
And if you look, staying on that row at columns F and G, the subscriber name is Keith Davidson linked to this number?
Yes.
So that when you say subscriber name, that's information that somebody provided to Verizon saying that I am a person who is linked to this account, right?
Yes.
And Mr. Burnick, if we could scroll to column AA, please. Do you see where it says MTN effective date?
Yes.
So that's a mobile telephone number effective date?
Correct.
So for this row, what does it say for this row? I am sorry, I can't see.
That was row 3, correct?
Yes, thank you.
April 30th, 2010.
So for this record, as of April 30th, 2010, going forward, this number was linked to the particular account that's reflected in this subscriber information, right?
Correct.
And for purposes of this record, prior to April of 2010, this record doesn't have anything to say about that, correct?
Correct.
And phone numbers can shift from account to account and person to person, right?
Yes.
And so, it's entirely possible that pre-April 2010, this number belonged to somebody else, right?
Yes.
I have one question about the toll records that we looked at in Government Exhibit 401. Those sorts of looked like the phone bills that I might get for my cell phone, right?
Yes.
And you said Verizon rounds up on the duration field?
Yes.
So if there was a call that lasted 15 seconds, does that bump up to 1 minute?
Yes.
And if a call lasted 1 second, it bumps up to 1 minute also?
Yes.
Thank you.
Anything else?
No, Judge.
Thank you. You may step down.
Thank you.
All right, jurors, let's take our morning recess. Please remember my admonitions. See you in a few minutes.
All rise, whereupon the jury exited the courtroom.
You may be seated. People, is there anything you want to discuss at this time?
No, we have to modify the exhibit as we discussed before.
I believe there was also an objection from the defense.
Yes, Judge.
Is this a good time to take up the objection?
Yes, Your Honor.
Let's do that.
So, Government Exhibit 411, it would be 411B is the proffered exhibit is an excerpt of an interview of President Trump by Larry King in 1999. And in substance, there is a question, what are your views on campaign finance reform? And part of what President Trump said in response to that in 1999 is that he is very experienced with the campaign finance laws, and I think the clip is limited to just about that. Our position is that that is not relevant with respect to President Trump's state of mind in 2016 and 2017 because there has been extensive revisions to the campaign finance laws in the intervening period, both statutory and in the Supreme Court. Whatever President Trump may have said in 1999 about his knowledge of the campaign finance laws is not probative of his state of mind in 2016 and 2017.
Your Honor, we disagree. We think that defendant's admission that he has extensive knowledge of campaign finance laws is obviously directly relevant to the case. We understand that there were, as Mr. Bove noted, extensive changes to campaign finance laws in 2002. We believe that's a reference to the McCain-Feingold Act. However, the separate contribution ban, which is the one that's relevant here, has been part of campaign finance laws since 1907, so close to 90 years before Mr. Trump made the admission in that video. And to the extent that defense counsel argues that the clip predates the relevant time period, that's an issue that goes to weight and not admissibility.
Do you have any other argument?
No, that's our position, Judge.
All right. I will rule after the break.
Short recess is taken.
This video was brought to you by my supporters on Indiegogo. YouTube will not monetize these videos, so I can only afford to keep making them with your support. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more like it, please donate to my Indiegogo campaign so we can finish this trial. You can find the campaign linked at the top of the description or scan the QR code on screen now.
Remain seated. Come to order. Part 59 is back in session.
All right. Two things regarding the people's application. I understand what you are saying, that the laws did not change between 1999 and 2017. I still feel that that's pretty attenuated. Plus, you are asking the jurors to draw an inference that because he knew the laws in 1999, he still knew them in 2015 and 2017. I think that's a lot of speculation. I am going to side with the defense and preclude you from introducing that. Regarding scheduling today, we have 2 more witnesses, right, today?
Yes.
And how long do you expect the witnesses to be?
I think we probably have an hour in total.
In total?
In total.
So, are we okay working until 1 o'clock? Or maybe a little bit longer than 1 o'clock, so we will end in the morning and not come back in the afternoon?
Yes, Your Honor.
Yes.
Your Honor, I have a legal matter about an exhibit that we can take up after the witnesses are done. I don't think it will take long.
Let's get the jury, please.
All rise, jury entering.
You may be seated.
Case on trial continued. All jurors are present and properly seated.
Jurors, before we call the next witness, I wanted to talk about the schedule for the rest of the day. I am told that we only have 2 more witnesses that are relatively short. Today's plan is we are going to work until about 1 o'clock or whatever time we get done so you don't have to come back in the afternoon. Let's call the next witness, please.
The people recall Georgia Longstreet.
Ms. Longstreet, you are still under oath. You may inquire.
Thank you, Your Honor. Welcome back, Ms. Longstreet. Can you remind everyone where you work and what your position is?
Yes. I work for the New York County District Attorney's Office, and I am a paralegal.
The last time you were here, I believe you testified that your duties and responsibilities include locating and saving social media posts relevant to the case?
Yep.
Is that your primary job function, or do you have many other duties and responsibilities in addition to that one?
Many other duties and responsibilities.
Do your other duties and responsibilities include analyzing materials produced to the District Attorney's Office in response to subpoenas?
Yes.
Does that include analyzing records of communications like text messages and call messages?
Yes.
Does that include analyzing contact information?
Yes.
Does it include matching contact information to text and call records?
Yes.
Do your duties and responsibilities also include locating and reviewing filings from other court proceedings that may be relevant to this case?
Yes.
And do they also include keeping track of key events related to the case?
Yes.
Now, you previously testified that you were assigned to work on a matter involving Donald Trump about a year and a half ago, right?
Yep,
Are you the only paralegal who works on this matter?
I am not.
Who else works on the matter with you in the paralegal capacity?
There are 2 other paralegals, Nishant Baumik and Jaden Jarmel-Schneider.
In addition to your own work, are you familiar with the work done by the other paralegals on the case?
Yes.
How are you familiar with that?
I like to think we all work as one. We all kind of do the same things.
And do you know what work they do in addition to your own?
Yep.
As part of your role on the matter involving Donald Trump, are you, Mr. Baumik, and Mr. Jarmel-Schneider responsible for reviewing materials produced to the DA's office in response to subpoenas?
Yes.
And does that include analyzing records of communications like text messages and phone calls?
Yes.
And does that include matching contact information to text and call records for this case?
Yes.
Are the records provided to the district attorney's office for this case in multiple different formats?
Yes.
Are you, Mr. Baumik, and Mr. Jarmel-Schneider required to analyze and work with the data in all of those different formats?
Yes.
And is the data provided in different time zones?
Yes.
And are you, as part of your job, required to convert time zones in order to analyze the data?
Yes.
In total, approximately, how many pages of text messages have you, Mr. Baumik, and Mr. Jarmel-Schneider reviewed in connection with the case?
Pages, I would say maybe like 2,500.
How many have you personally reviewed?
Probably around 100.
Approximately, how many pages of call records have you, Mr. Baumik, and Mr. Jarmel-Schneider reviewed in connection with the case?
Over 10,000 pages.
And how many have you personally reviewed?
Probably around 2,000 to 3,000.
Approximately, how much contact information have you and the other paralegals reviewed in connection with the case?
Probably around 300 to 500 pages.
And how many have you personally reviewed?
100 to 200.
Approximately, how many contacts have you and the other paralegals have had to match with text and phone records?
About 50.
Did you and Mr. Baumik and Mr. Jarmel-Schneider also review and save public court filings that could be relevant to the case?
Yes.
Approximately, how many legal proceedings did you and the other paralegals review and save items from?
Approximately 75 different cases.
Approximately, how many different court filings total did you and the paralegal team review and save?
About 500.
Through your work on the case, are you familiar with dates of important court filings?
Yes.
Before testifying today, did you have an opportunity to review files marked for identification as People's Exhibits 407F, 407G, 407H, and 407I?
Yes.
Are they public posts from the Twitter handle @RealDonaldTrump?
Yes.
Who retrieved and saved those posts?
I did.
Did you save them in a particular way?
I did.
And did you save them in the same way that you saved the previous Twitter posts that we discussed last time?
Yes.
Can you briefly remind the jury what that was?
Yes. So I just used the platform or the tool that we have to screenshot, and I then screenshot the post, save it to a folder that was relevant to the post, and then hash the post.
And hashing, again, is a way to uniquely identify each post?
Yeah.
Are these exhibits exact copies of the public posts that you saved and hashed?
Yes.
The people now offer into evidence exhibits 407F, G, H, and I.
Your Honor, the same objection as discussed last week.
Your objection is noted and overruled. People's Exhibits 407F, G, H, and I are accepted into evidence.
All right. Can you please display what's now in evidence as People's Exhibit 407F? Ms. Longstreet, is this a Twitter post?
Yes.
And I think last time you explained some aspects of the social media platform Twitter and how it operated in 2016?
Yep.
In addition to those questions, can you explain what a thread is?
Yes. So Twitter has a character limit which only allows you to put a certain amount of characters for one tweet. So a way that some users are able to get around the character limit is by posting multiple tweets in the same thread, so they are kind of connected to each other in a sense.
And is this an example of a thread?
Yes.
Is the first post? I am sorry. Is the top post shown here the first one in time?
Yep.
Were all of these posts made the same day?
Yes.
What Twitter handle was used to make these posts?
@RealDonaldTrump.
What's the date and time shown for the top post?
April 21st, 2018 at 9:10 a.m.
Can you please focus on just the top post? Can you read the top post to the jury?
Yes. The New York Times and a third-rate reporter named Maggie Haberman, known as a Crooked H flunky, who I don't speak to and have nothing to do with, are going out of their way to destroy Michael Cohen and his relationship with me in the hope that he will flip. They use ...
Can you pull up the bottom two posts, please? Can you read those? Non-existent sources and a drunk/drugged-up loser who hates Michael, a fine person with a wonderful family. Michael is a businessman for his own account/lawyer who I always liked and respected. Most people will flip if the government lets them out of trouble, even if it means lying or making up stories. Sorry. I don't see Michael doing that despite the horrible witch hunt and the dishonest media. What's the date for all three of the posts? April 21st, 2018. You can take that down. Did the court filings that you reviewed include a federal criminal case for Michael Cohen? Yes. Was one of the court filings the paralegal team saved for that case a guilty plea? Yes. Do you know the date of that guilty plea? I believe it was August 21st, 2018. Now, can we please display what is in evidence as People's Exhibit 407H? Can you see that, Ms. Longstreet? Yes. Is this another Twitter post? Yes. What Twitter handle was used to make this post? @RealDonaldTrump. And what is the date and time for this post? It ends August 22nd, 2018 at 8:44 a.m. Can you please read this to the jury? If anyone is looking for a good lawyer, I would strongly suggest that you don't retain the services of Michael Cohen. And is there an explanation point end of that post? Yes, sorry. And can we take this down and display what's in evidence as People's Exhibit 407I? Is this another Twitter post that you pulled and saved? Yes. What is the Twitter handle used to make this post? @RealDonaldTrump. What is the date and time shown for this post? August 22nd, 2018, at 9:21 a.m. And is that the same day as the last post we just saw? Yes. How long after the post we just saw was this one posted? I would have to see the timestamp. It's fine, but it was posted the same day? Yes. Can you read this post to the jury? Yes. I feel very badly for Paul Manafort and his wonderful family. Justice took a 12-year-old tax case, among other things, applied tremendous pressure on him, and unlike Michael Cohen, he refused to make up stories in order to get a deal. Such respect for a great man. Explanation point. All right. We can take that down. Now, finally, can we display what's in evidence as People's Exhibit 407G, please? Can you flip through the pages of this exhibit quickly? Ms. Longstreet, is this another Twitter post that you saved? Yes. Is this another example of a thread? Yes. And how many parts does this thread have? 3. What was the Twitter handle used to make these posts? @RealDonaldTrump. And what is the date and time shown for the top post? May 3rd, 2018 at 6:46 a.m. And can you please read the post for the jury? Mr. Cohen, an attorney, received a monthly retainer, not from the campaign and having nothing to do with the campaign, from which he entered into through reimbursement a private contract between two parties, known as a non-disclosure agreement or NDA. These agreements are... Then move to the second post to the thread. Very common amongst celebrities and people of wealth. In this case, it is in full force and effect, and will be used in arbitration for damages against Ms. Clifford Daniels. The agreement was used to stop the false and extortionist accusations made by her about an affair. And is this now the final post in the thread? Yes. Despite already having signed a detailed letter admitting that there was no affair, prior to its violation by Ms. Clifford and her attorney, this was a private agreement. Money for the campaign or campaign contributions played no role in this transaction. Thank you. Can we take that down, please? Now, can we show everyone what's already in evidence as People's Exhibit 171A? Ms. Longstreet, do you recognize this? Yes. And how do you recognize it? This was something that the paralegal team had to analyze in response to subpoena compliance. So this was produced. This is a document that was produced to the DA's office pursuant to a subpoena? Yes. And you and the paralegal team analyzed the document after it was received? Yes. Can you please blow up the two middle columns? And do you see contact information in those middle columns? Yes. Based on your work on the case, can you identify the individuals associated with the contact information provided there? Yes. So looking first on the left, there is something redacted, and then it says, AdelinHoward.com. Is that an email address? Yes. Do you know who that email address is associated with? Yes. Who is it? Dylan Howard. And do you see just below that there is an email address that ends dwighticommunications.com? Yes. Based upon your work on the case, can you identify the individual associated with that email address? Yes. Who is it? Dylan Howard. Looking now to the other column, do you see where it just has the letter G? Yes. And there are the last 4 digits of the phone number shown there? Yeah. Based on your work on the case, can you identify the individual associated with that phone number? Yeah. Who is it? Gina Rodriguez. Now, if we take a look at the second page of the PDF, the same 2 columns, Can we show both the blue and green portions near the top? So which column? Here is the to column, and which is the from column?
The to column is on the left, and the from column is on the right.
Is that typical, or is it more standard to have those columns switched?
It's more standard to have them switched.
Now can we look at the text? A few of the text messages on the right, please. Ms. Longstreet, based on your analysis of the various calls and text messages, can you tell what time zone this is in?
Yes.
What time zone is that?
UIC.
What is UTC time?
UTC time is a standardized time zone for everybody. So I don't remember exactly what UTC stands for. It's 3 hours ahead based, depending on when daylight savings is.
Does it correspond with time zones in London?
Yes.
So the New York time zone for these might depend on whether it was daylight savings time or not?
Yes.
If we can zoom back out, do you see there are portions of this exhibit that have been redacted?
Yes.
Who redacted this?
I did.
All right. Now, turning back to the first page of the document, focusing on the first 5 text messages on the right and showing the to and from column. Were all of these text messages sent on the same date?
Yes.
What date is that?
April 7th, 2016.
Can you please read these text messages to the jury identifying who they're from and who they're to?
So this first one is from Mrs. Rodriguez to Mr. Howard, and it says, Stormy Daniels was his mistress. From Mr. Howard to Ms. Rodriguez. I bet she was. Mr. Howard to Ms. Rodriguez. Can you email me on that? Ms. Rodriguez to Mr. Howard. Yes, I will send you what I have. From Mr. Howard to Ms. Rodriguez. Great.
Can we now turn to page 2 of the PDF? Focus on the last 5 text messages shown in the document. Were these all sent on the same date?
Yes.
What date was that?
June 28th, 2016.
Can you please read these to the jury? Include who they're from and who they're to?
Yes. So this first one is from Ms. Rodriguez to Mr. Howard. Stormy Daniels. From Ms. Rodriguez to Mr. Howard. I have her. From Mr. Howard to Ms. Rodriguez. Is she ready to talk? From Mr. Howard to Ms. Rodriguez. I thought she denounced it previously. From Ms. Rodriguez to Mr. Howard. She said she will do it under 2 conditions.
And can we turn now to the next page of the PDF? I know the font is pretty small, but are you able to see the date of all of the text messages on this page?
Yes.
Are they all the same date?
Yes.
And what is that date?
June 28th, 2016.
The same date as the page before?
Yes.
And can you please read the top text message on the page?
Yes, from Ms. Rodriguez to Mr. Howard. She never did.
And can you pull up? We'll skip next text and pull up the following 4. Can you please read these to the jury?
Yes. From Ms. Rodriguez to Mr. Howard. She doesn't want to go on record about it, but will tell the story through a source. She will take she's had sex with him. She wants $100K. From Mr. Howard to Ms. Rodriguez. Once or ongoing relationship. From Ms. Rodriguez to Mr. Howard. A couple of times. And he promised her a condo, a spot on The Apprentice. She went to the Miss America pageant. He got her in. From Ms. Rodriguez to Mr. Howard. He never did anything for her.
Can you pull up the bottom 2 text messages on the page? Can you read those to the jury?
Yes. From Ms. Rodriguez to Mr. Howard. She met him at a celebrity golf tournament. She was there with wicked pictures. From Mr. Howard to Ms. Rodriguez. Okay. Let me get back to you.
Turning now to the next page of the document. Can you see text messages starting on the date, June 29th, 2016?
Yes.
And can we please pull up the first 3 text messages from that date? And can you read those to the jury once they're up?
Yes. From Ms. Rodriguez to Mr. Howard. Any word on Stormy? From Ms. Rodriguez to Mr. Howard. Question mark. From Mr. Howard to Ms. Rodriguez. Have got to discuss it with the chief.
Now can we blow up the last 2 text messages on that page? What is the date of these text messages?
July 23rd, 2016.
And can we please read those to the jury?
Yes. From Ms. Rodriguez to Mr. Howard. What happened with the Stormy Daniels interview on Trump? From Mr. Howard to Ms. Rodriguez. Let's discuss it this week.
Now turning to the next page of the PDF. Turning to the top 6 text messages on that page. Are these all from the same date?
Yes.
Same date as the page before?
Yes.
That's July 23rd, 2016?
Yes.
And can you read these to the jury?
Yes, from Ms. Rodriguez to Mr. Howard. Okay. She asking. From Mr. Howard to Ms. Rodriguez. Let's talk face to face. From Ms. Rodriguez to Mr. Howard. Okay. From Ms. Rodriguez to Mr. Howard. What day this week? From Mr. Howard to Ms. Rodriguez. I am there Sunday night through Wednesday, maybe Thursday. From Ms. Rodriguez to Mr. Howard. Let's meet Thursday.
Can we skip a couple of text messages, then show the next 2? Can you please, I am sorry, what is date of these text messages?
July 29, 2016.
Can you please read these to the jury?
Yes. From Mr. Howard to Ms. Rodriguez. I'm trying to get Cohen here on Monday on something, so stand by. We'll know tomorrow. Keep that between us. From Ms. Rodriguez to Mr. Howard. Want to come Monday too?
Can we turn to the next page of the PDF, please? Can we show just the top portion of just the second text message on the page. What is date of this text message?
July 31st, 2016.
Who is it from?
Ms. Rodriguez.
And can you read this to the jury?
Yes. Whatever happened with the Stormy Daniels interview?
And can we take that down? Ms. Longstreet, do you see any other text messages from that date?
No.
Can we please pull up the next 3 text messages? Were these all sent on the same date?
Yes.
What date?
August 8th, 2016.
Can you please read these to the jury?
Yes. From Ms. Rodriguez to Mr. Howard. Call me. From Mr. Howard to Ms. Rodriguez. It will have to be later on. Wall-to-wall meetings for a few hours. From Ms. Rodriguez to Mr. Howard. Okay.
Now, can we pull up the last 4 text messages on that page? And actually, before we do that, can we flip to the next page of the PDF? Do you see the date for the text messages on this page?
Yes.
And what is the date for the top set of text messages?
October 8th, 2016.
And do you see the timestamps?
Yes.
What are the timestamps for the top few text messages?
23 hours, 39 minutes, and 52 seconds in UTC time.
How about the text messages on the bottom of that page?
The timestamp.
What is the date?
October 9th, 2016.
And what does the timestamp show?
They are all between 0017 and 0019.
And is that in UTC time?
Yes.
So what would the dates for all of these text messages, New York?
October 8th, 2016.
Can we now go back to the previous page and blow up the bottom 4 text messages? Are these from October 8th?
Yes.
Can you read these to the jury?
Yes. From Ms. Rodriguez to Mr. Howard. Stormy Daniels and Trump with her is up on the dirty, and Fox News has been calling. Stormy has not confirmed or spoken. Are you interested? From Mr. Howard to Ms. Rodriguez. She will confirm on record. ? From Ms. Rodriguez to Mr. Howard. Yes. From Mr. Howard to Ms. Rodriguez. Can you email me the pitch on Stormy? I need to elevate it to my CEO.
Can you flip to the next page and show the top 3 text messages? And can you read these to the jury?
Yes. From Mr. Howard to Ms. Rodriguez. He likely will pay. From Ms. Rodriguez to Mr. Howard. Yes, I will send to you. From Ms. Rodriguez to Mr. Howard. Okay.
And can we please pull up the next 5 text messages? And can you please read these to the jury?
From Mr. Howard to Ms. Rodriguez. How much for Stormy? From Ms. Rodriguez to Mr. Howard. $250K. From Mr. Howard to Ms. Rodriguez. You have that bid? From Ms. Rodriguez to Mr. Howard. Yes, working on it. From Ms. Rodriguez to Mr. Howard. GMA wants her too.
Turning now to the next page of the PDF, and looking at the date and timestamps of the text messages on this page. What is the date shown for all of these text messages?
October 9th, 2016.
And what is the timestamp range for these?
0019 to 0021 in UTC time.
And what date would these be in New York?
October 8th, 2016.
Same as the ones we just looked at?
Yes.
Focusing on after the first text messages, the following 3. Can you read these to the jury?
Yes. From Ms. Rodriguez to Mr. Howard. Daily Mail 2. From Mr. Howard to Ms. Rodriguez. Well, I would buy it, but I ain't got $250K LOL. GMA can't pay her. They can license pics, etc. I will tie it up ASAP if we can get realistic price. From Ms. Rodriguez to Mr. Howard. How much?
Can we please blow up the bottom 4 text messages on that page? Can you please read these to the jury?
Yes, from Mr. Howard to Ms. Rodriguez. I can get 100. From Ms. Rodriguez to Mr. Howard. LOL. From Ms. Rodriguez to Mr. Howard. Okay, what about 150K from Mr. Howard to Ms. Rodriguez? 110.
Can we please go to the next page? Can we please blow up the top 4 text messages? Can you read these to the jury?
Yes. From Ms. Rodriguez to Mr. Howard, 125K. From Mr. Howard to Ms. Rodriguez. LOL. From Mr. Howard to Ms. Rodriguez. 120. From Ms. Rodriguez to Mr. Howard. Sold.
And leaving this up for a second, do you see the date and timestamps for these text messages?
Yes.
What is the date of all of them?
October 9th, 2016.
What is the timestamp range for these?
Of 2127 to 2150 UTC time.
And is it your understanding that these are all October 8th, 2016 in New York time?
Yes.
Can we please pull up the next 4 text messages? I'm sorry, the next 3 text messages. Can you please read? I am sorry. Withdrawn. What are the dates of the top 2 text messages here?
October 9th, 2016.
And were they sent shortly after the text messages we just saw?
Yes.
Can you please read these to the jury?
From Mr. Howard to Ms. Rodriguez. I'm at dinner. I will email contract when back at hotel or first thing in AM from Ms. Rodriguez to Mr. Howard. Okay.
And what is the third text message there? What is the date and timestamp of that one?
October 9th, 2016. At 18 hours 54 minutes and 31 second UTC time.
What would the date for this one be in New York?
October 9th, 2016.
Can you read this one to the jury?
From Ms. Rodriguez to Mr. Howard. Daily Mail is offering 200.
Thank you. You can take that down. Moving on to the next page of the PDF. Can you please highlight the top 2 text messages on the page? Ms. Longstreet, what are the dates of these text messages?
October 9th, 2016.
Can you read these to the jury?
Yes. From Ms. Rodriguez to Mr. Howard. I haven't told them anything except what I put in email yesterday. From Ms. Rodriguez to Mr. Howard. They signed NDA and sent over. I haven't responded.
We can take those down. Can we please blow up the following 2 text messages? What is the date of these text messages?
October 10th, 2016.
Can you read these to the jury?
Yes. From Ms. Rodriguez to Mr. Howard. And Stormy leaves tomorrow to go back home. From Mr. Howard to Ms. Rodriguez in a few hours.
Can we pull up the messages, please? What is the date of these?
October 17th, 2016.
And can you read these to the jury?
From Ms. Rodriguez to Mr. Howard. We're not doing the Trump deal. From Mr. Howard to Ms. Rodriguez. Keith gave me heads up. What happened? From Ms. Rodriguez to Mr. Howard. They didn't pay when said they would, and they keep trying to buy more time. Daily Mail wants it bad, so we're doing it. From Mr. Howard to Ms. Rodriguez. Fair call. From Mr. Howard to Ms. Rodriguez. Their loss. From Ms. Rodriguez to Mr. Howard. Agreed.
Turning now to the next page of the PDF. Can we blow up the 5th text message down and the 5 text messages there? What is the date of these text messages?
October 19th, 2016.
Can you read these to the jury?
From Ms. Rodriguez to Mr. Howard. Spoke to Keith last night and we're all good. From Mr. Howard to Ms. Rodriguez. Okay. From Mr. Howard to Ms. Rodriguez. Sorted out. From Ms. Rodriguez to Mr. Howard. Redacted. From Mr. Howard to Ms. Rodriguez. Good.
And can we please pull up the next 2 text messages? What is date of these text messages?
October 25th, 2016.
Turning now to the next page of the PDF. Are all of the text messages on this page also that same date?
Yes.
Going back 1 page and pulling up the bottom 3 text messages. Can you read the top 2 to the jury?
From Ms. Rodriguez to Mr. Howard. On phone with Katie and Stormy. From Mr. Howard to Ms. Rodriguez. Okay. I blew a gasket at his people and told them not to fuck with people. Message made and heard.
Turning now to the next page. Can you highlight the bottom 5 text messages on this page? Can you read these to the jury?
Yes. From Mr. Howard to Ms. Rodriguez. I had to apologize to my CEO. From Mr. Howard to Ms. Rodriguez. I explained that 2 people saved his ass today and meeting his call with his people, and I am going to tell them how it's going to be. From Ms. Rodriguez to Mr. Howard. Thank you so much. You think it will happen? From Mr. Howard to Ms. Rodriguez. Yes. They were told in no uncertain terms. From Mr. Howard to Ms. Rodriguez. I'm not going to burn my lifelong contact for these fuckers.
And turning to the next page of the PDF, starting with the text message. The first text message dated October 26th, 2016. Can you pull up those first 3? Can you read these to the jury?
From Ms. Rodriguez to Mr. Howard. They didn't pay and she doesn't believe it and she's doing her press conf in the morning. She hired another attorney. From Mr. Howard to Ms. Rodriguez. What deadline did they have? From Ms. Rodriguez to Mr. Howard. This morning.
And can we turn to the next page of the PDF, please? And highlight the last text message on the page. What is the date of that text message?
October 26th, 2016.
And can you read that to the jury?
From Mr. Howard to Ms. Rodriguez. Good news, I hear.
I have no further questions.
Your witness.
Good morning again, Ms. Longstreet. How are you?
Good. How are you?
We spoke last Friday, correct?
We did.
So I'm not going to re-ask all the questions that I asked last Friday about the work that you did. The first was talking about the tweets and the truths that you reviewed. I believe you testified last week, but correct me if I'm wrong, that you reviewed thousands of tweets and truths as part of your work on this case.
I did.
And the tweets that we saw today, again, you didn't select which ones to put up out of the thousands that you reviewed. For example, the table here and to my right selected them, right?
That's correct.
And since you testified last Friday, Have you been tasked with doing any additional social media reviews of anybody involved in this case?
Like additional review that wasn't already being done before?
Yes.
No.
So you're still not reviewing Mr. Cohen's TikTok?
Not currently, no.
You're not aware of something that he TikToked 2 nights ago, for example, on Wednesday night?
Objection.
Overruled.
I am not.
Turning to the number of text messages that you just read back and forth, you've been in court every day during this trial, correct?
Correct.
And you were here when Mr. Pecker testified?
Yes.
And you're aware that he was shown a number of text messages that he was a participant in, correct?
Yes.
And when he was shown text messages that he was a participant in, you recall questions being asked of him about what he meant by that or what his understanding was of what somebody else sent to him.
Yes.
And you agree that the text messages that you just read, you have no personal knowledge about the reason they were sent or even whether they were accurate when they were sent by either of the folks, Ms. Rodriguez or Mr. Howard. Do you?
No personal knowledge, no.
When, for example, Ms. Rodriguez talks about offers from the Daily Mail and the timing of those offers, you have no knowledge about whether she was telling the truth. Do you?
No.
And you have no knowledge about any of the no knowledge about the truthfulness or the reasoning behind the text that Mr. Howard sent in response, or because of whatever Ms. Rodriguez said, correct?
Can you ask that again?
Sure. You have no personal knowledge about either the communications that Mr. Howard initiated or that he responded to in the series of text messages that you just read to the jury, correct?
Correct.
It's a long way of saying you just read what was written on the exhibit, correct?
Yes.
And that's different, would you agree, than when Mr. Pecker was asked about the reasoning behind text messages and what he meant by that, correct?
Yes.
And same with Ms. Hicks?
Yes.
Excuse me, Your Honor. Now, by the way, the same with the text messages of Mr. Cohen, correct, meaning you didn't read any today, but you have reviewed as part of your work on this case, text messages sent and received from Mr. Cohen as well, correct?
Yes.
Now, going back briefly to the social media that you reviewed, were you also tasked with reviewing Ms. Daniels' social media over the last couple of years?
Yes.
And are you continuing to review it during this trial?
Yes.
Did you review it, for example, this week or last night?
Not last night, but I think earlier in the week at some point, yeah.
And as part of that review, not limiting it to Ms. Daniels, but to all the parties that you're reviewing, when you observe something that you believe to be interesting, what's the process that you use to alert that to your team?
Well, I think it depends. I think there are some things that I just know for a fact we would want to have saved to our case file. There are other things I have a question about. I will call one of the attorneys and ask them if they think I should pull it or not.
Basically not to. But based upon the information you provide them, the prosecutors that you work with decide whether to use it or not use it, correct?
Basically, yeah.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Anything else?
No, Your Honor.
Your next witness.
Judge, the people called Jaden Jarmel-Schneider.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony that you are going to give before this court and jury shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Do you so swear or affirm?
I do.
Have a seat. State your full name for the record, spelling your last name.
Jaden Jarmel-Schneider. Jarmel-Schneider.
County of residence?
New York County.
Good afternoon. You may inquire.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Mr. Schneider. Where do you work?
I work at the New York County District Attorney's Office.
How long have you worked there?
Coming up on 2 years.
And what is your current position there?
I am a paralegal.
What are some of the things that you do as a paralegal at the DA's office?
It really runs the gamut. But in general, we help the attorneys, sending out subpoenas and kind of organizing and analyzing whatever records we receive in response.
In your work as a paralegal at the District Attorney's Office, were you assigned to an investigation involving Donald Trump?
Yes.
As part of your role in that investigation, were you tasked with analyzing phone records pertaining to the case?
Yes.
Was it phone records and also other kinds of records?
Yes.
Did the phone records include the AT&T records that are contained in what was admitted earlier today in People's Exhibit 400?
Yes.
Did it also include the Verizon records that were admitted into evidence earlier today as People's Exhibit 401?
Yes.
Can you tell us generally what is contained within those phone records?
So we generally get 2 kinds of records. Subscriber records review basic information about the user associated with the phone record. Call detail records, which are kind of a log of all the incoming and outgoing calls associated with whatever number was subpoenaed.
What format are the phone records in when you get them?
Depends on the phone carrier. So for AT&T, we got them as PDF text files, image files. For Verizon, we get them as Excel spreadsheets and Word documents in PDF.
In your work reviewing various phone records, did you also review information contained in data extractions from Michael Cohen's phones?
Yes.
What did you review?
I reviewed Celebrite Reports, which is the application used to review the data that is extracted on call logs, contact lists, calendar invites, various pieces of metadata, etc.
Did that include what is in evidence? Contact information from those phones that is in evidence currently as people's 263 and 264?
Yes.
Did it include text messages that are in evidence as people's 249 through 251, 255 through 260 and 262?
Yes.
Did it include call logs that are in evidence as people's 261?
Yes.
Did you review subscriber information contained in people's 400 and 401?
Yes.
Did you also review a contact list contained in people's 69B in evidence?
I did.
In your work on the investigation, did you prepare a summary report, several summary reports, or withdrawn? Let me rephrase that. In your work on the investigation, did you prepare a summary report of contact information?
I did.
What information did you rely on in making that report?
So I looked at the subscriber records that I mentioned from AT&T and Verizon. I also looked at other pieces of documentary records, text messages, records, email signatures, contact lists produced by the Trump Organization. I also looked at the contact lists that were extracted from Mr. Cohen's cell phones.
What was the purpose of creating this report?
We wanted to give the jury a sense of how we figured out which phone numbers were associated with which people. Kind of where the phone numbers would show up in the evidence that we ultimately used.
Are the records that you relied on in making this chart all in evidence in this case?
Yes.
If we can pull up for the court and parties and the witness but not the jury, what's been marked as People's 416 for identification? Do you recognize what that is?
Yes.
What is it?
This is the phone key I was just talking about.
You created this?
I did.
Are there redactions in this chart?
Yes.
What is redacted?
The first 6 digits of all the phone numbers.
Other than that, is this an exact copy of the key that you created?
Yes.
At this time, I would offer People's 416 into evidence.
No objection.
416 is accepted into evidence.
If we can display that to the jury, can you walk us through what we're looking at?
Sure. So in the right column under the heading Exhibit, it shows what the source document was and what exhibit number it came from. In the left column called Phone Number, it is the phone number, and the next column is the name as it appears on the source document on the exhibit. Under the source column, it's just the kind of record: email, text, contact list, etc.
For some of the rows, there is one name associated with a number, but then there are multiple sources. Why is that?
A lot of the phone numbers we saw in several different places, so we put various documents that we found them on just to corroborate that the phone number did belong to the person that is listed next to them.
Okay, we can take that down. I now want to talk about another part of the work that you did with the phone records here. Did you create a number of summaries of phone records?
Yes.
What was contained in those summaries?
These are just logs of phone calls between pairs of people.
You mentioned that you received the records that we just discussed earlier in a number of file formats, particularly the records now in People's 400 and 401 from AT&T and Verizon. Starting with the AT&T records, how did you go about putting data in the summary?
We have a software that reads through the text files, the AT&T files. It allows us to file and sort by phone number, date, caller, etc. We uploaded the text files, filtered and sorted and formatted them to look pretty.
What did you do with the Verizon records?
So the Verizon records were a particular year. They came in as a PDF. We made them text readable, uploaded the text into Excel, wrote simple scripts to extract the information that was put into a format that was file readable. Then we just filtered again by date and time, caller phone number, etc., then formatted them.
In addition to what's in evidence as People's 400 and 401, did you include any other records in the call summaries?
Yes.
Do you recall what date?
In some cases, we put calls that were taken off of the call log that is in evidence as 261, which is calls pulled from Mr. Cohen's phone.
What was the purpose of creating these summaries?
So as you might have seen, the phone records are somewhat hard to decipher. They don't list which caller is associated with the phone number. They're all different time zones, and kind of more importantly, they include a lot of extraneous outside calls of people that are not relevant. We wanted to create summaries that were a bit more digestible and easy, and by time zone.
You mentioned different time zones. How did you standardize the records for the time zones?
So it differed between AT&T and Verizon. For AT&T, all the time zones were in UTC. We were able to mass convert them to Eastern Standard Time. We accounted for daylight savings time. For Verizon, the time zone depended on the location they were in when they made or received the call. We went through and determined the location, which was listed on the call detail records, and converted them to all New York time, which is to say, we standardized everything to New York time.
Now, are the summaries of the phone records based solely on the information contained in exhibits already in evidence?
Yes.
And are those the exhibits we already discussed?
Yes.
In preparing the summaries of the phone records, did you ensure that the information you were including in the summaries fairly and accurately reflected the information in the exhibits in evidence?
Yes.
How did you do that?
So after we made the summaries, we went through line by line and compared to the underlying call detail record.
Have you reviewed what's been marked previously as People's 337 through 342 and 344 through 349 for identification?
Yes.
And is People's 337 calls between Michael Cohen and Keith Davidson?
Yes.
Is People's 338 calls between Michael Cohen and Hicks?
Yes.
Is People's 339 calls between Michael Cohen and Dylan Howard?
Yes.
Is People's 340 calls between Michael Cohen and David Pecker?
Yes.
Is People's 341 calls between Michael Cohen and Keith Schiller?
Yes.
Is People's 342 calls between Michael Cohen and Alan Weisselberg?
Yes.
Is People's 344 calls between Keith Davidson and Gina Rodriguez?
Yes.
Is People's 345 calls between Dylan Howard and Keith Davidson?
Yes.
Is People's 346 calls between Dylan Howard and David Pecker?
Yes.
Is People's 347 calls between Dylan Howard and Gina Rodriguez?
Yes.
Is People's 348 calls between the Trump Organization and Michael Cohen?
Yes.
Is People's 349 calls between the defendant and Michael Cohen?
Yes.
And are those the phone summaries that you created?
Yes.
At this time, I offer People's 337 through 342 and 344 through 349 into evidence.
No objection.
337 through 342 and 344 through 349 are received into evidence.
Thank you. If we can pull up what's in evidence as People's 342 for everybody. And if you could, again, sort of explain to us about what the different columns are and what we're seeing. Is this a representative example of one of the summaries that you created?
Somewhat short one, but yes.
But basically, they all look the same. Some may be longer?
Yes.
Is this call between Michael Cohen and Alan Weisselberg?
Yes.
Do we see that on the top left of the chart?
Yes.
We saw some redactions. What is redacted in these charts?
The first 6 digits of every phone number.
What are the numbers next to Michael Cohen and the name Alan Weisselberg?
Michael Cohen has 0114, and Alan Weisselberg has 7,224 and 4,509.
Can you walk us through what this chart demonstrates?
So the left column is the date and time in Eastern Time. The second column is the date and time in UTC, which is how it was originally recorded in the AT&T records. The time column tells whether the call is a text or voicemail. The from tells you who the call is from, the phone number, and the to column tells you who the call is to. The duration is how long the call was, the minutes. The source column tells you which phone carrier or where we got the records from.
Thank you. And again, I am not going to walk through all of the exhibits we admitted. Do they all have the same format?
Yes.
Thank you. You can take that down. Could we now pull up what is in evidence as People's 247? Do you recognize what this is?
I do.
What is it?
This is a Celebrate report showing the metadata associated with the recording that was extracted from Michael Cohen's phone.
Can you see on this report the approximate time that the recording ended?
Not exactly, but you can figure it out. The timestamp the recording is 10:56 and 42 seconds a.m. in New York time, and the duration of the recording is 2 minutes and 51 seconds. If you add them together, the recording ended at 10:59 and about 30 seconds a.m. in New York City time.
Okay, we can take that down. Did you also review the call records already in evidence as People's 400 and 401?
I did.
Did you review records relating to the phone ending in 114?
Yes.
Who did that phone number belong to?
Michael Cohen.
Did you identify incoming calls to that phone number that began at approximately the same time as the recording ended?
Yes.
Could we pull up from People's 400 the page Bates number Danny ID DJ 00002726, which is redacted to be displayed? What line number is that call on this report?
It's line 61269192.
And what was the connection time on that call?
This is 2:59 and 53 seconds in UTC time. At that time of year, that would have been at 10:59 and 53 seconds New York City time.
How long was the seizure time on this call?
23 seconds.
And what is the time of this call in relation to when the recording ended that we just looked at on People's 247?
So the recording ended at 10:59 and about 30 seconds a.m. Eastern time. So this call was connected about 23 seconds later.
Thank you. We can pull that down. Now, can we pull up just for the parties and the witness and the judge what has been marked as People's 350 for identification? Do you recognize this?
I do.
What is this?
This is a summary chart of what's in evidence as People's Exhibits 1 through 34.
Did you review and confirm People 350 for identification?
I did.
Can you describe how you did that?
So I looked at the chart, and I went back to each exhibit that it references and cross-referenced to make sure everything was accurately reflected.
What kinds of documents are People's 1 through 34?
They are invoices, vouchers from the Trump Organization's multi-data system, and checks.
I do have an objection if we can go to sidebar.
Whereupon proceedings were held at sidebar.
Judge, our objection is to the text on the bottom right, false business records or something like to that effect. Some things popped up on the screen. Has it been modified?
No.
They're doing it advanced. They're anticipating my objection.
You said your objection.
Judge, this is unduly argumentative.
This is a summary of the 34 business records, and essentially, it's to assist the jury in associating the specific business records with counts. We have no problem with some kind of instruction to the jury that the title is not in evidence, but these are records that we're alleging are business records.
What is the purpose for introducing it into evidence now? You can probably do it on summation. You can do it in summation. I think it would be perfectly appropriate at that time.
So could we. I'm just trying to think how we can modify it. Can we call it alleged false business records?
There is a title. It says the counts. I think if you can keep the text on the top, just redact the title on the bottom, just get the summary in.
You have it. I think for summation, you won't have an argument, okay?
Okay.
Whereupon the following proceedings were held in open court.
Mr. Bove, we resolved your objection as discussed at the bench.
Thank you, Judge.
If we can. When you are ready, display just for the parties, the court, and the witness the summary chart again. Judge, at this time, the people offer People's 350 for identification into evidence.
As modified, no objection.
Subject to redaction.
If we can display that for everybody. Can you just walk us through again, first of all, what is this summarizing?
This is summarizing People's Exhibits 1 through 34 evidence.
And are there 3 different rows?
Yes.
Can you tell us what each row indicates?
The top row are invoices. The middle row are vouchers. And the bottom row are the checks.
And then are there columns by month?
Yes.
Starting with the invoices, is there only one invoice for the months of January and February?
Yes.
And below that, for January and February, are there 2 vouchers?
Yes.
What information is included in this chart vouchers?
The dollar amount of the voucher entry in some of the months, and all of the months the number associated with the voucher entry.
Just going back up to the invoice, what information is included in the invoice row?
The date of the invoice and the dollar amount requested on the invoice.
And then below those 2 things, there is something called count number. What is that?
Each of these exhibits is associated with a count in the indictment. So the red count number corresponds to that count.
And if we could just continue going down January and February, those 2 columns, we talked about the 1 invoice, 2 vouchers. And is there only 1 check?
Yes.
How many invoices were there in total on this chart?
11.
And can you just read which counts they're associated with?
Counts 1, 5, 8, 11, 14, 17, 20, 23, 26, 29, and 32.
After January and February, is there 1 invoice for each month for the rest of the year?
Yes.
Going down to vouchers, same question. Could you just read the count number for each of the vouchers?
Sure. Counts 2, 3, 6, 9, 12, 15, 18, 21, 24, 27, 30, and 33.
And is there 1 voucher for every month in 2017?
Yes.
And finally, in checks, could you read the count number for each check?
Sure. It's counts 4, 7, 10, 13, 16, 19, 22, 25, 28, 31, and 34.
And after January and February, is there 1 check for each of the remaining months in 2017?
Yes.
And if we look at the column all the way on the right where there are just 3 blue boxes, can you tell us what those are?
It's just tallying up the number of each category of record.
And then at the bottom where it says business records?
This is the total number of business records.
Is that also the total number of counts in the indictment?
Yes.
I have nothing further.
Mr. Bove, please.
Thank you, Judge. May I inquire?
Yes.
Thank you. Mr. Schneider or Mr. Jarmel-Schneider?
Whichever is easier for you.
What's your preference?
Jarmel-Schneider, thank you.
Mr. Jarmel-Schneider, you testified about some call summary charts, right?
Yes.
That sounded like a lot of work.
Yes.
At times, arguably tedious work.
Could be.
The tolling.
Honestly, I kind of enjoyed it.
I hear that. Respect.
Laughter from the audience.
A lot of that work had to take place before the trial, right?
All of it.
Because you've been sitting over here the whole trial, correct?
Yes.
So, you know that there were summaries that were sort of finalized from a quality control perspective from your standpoint and then produced to President Trump before the trial, right?
What do you mean?
Versions of those charts that were marked as exhibits, produced and marked as exhibits, were produced to the defense before the trial, right?
Yes.
Those are the ones that passed muster from your perspective?
I would like to think they all did.
Right, the ones that were produced before the trial?
Yes.
Just so we're clear, the ones that are in evidence now are not actually summaries of every toll between the participants on the chart, right?
No, that would be tens of hundreds of thousands of calls.
Just as an example, going to Exhibit 337 is a call summary chart, calls between Michael Cohen and Keith Davidson.
Yes.
And the one that's admitted in evidence is not a summary of every toll that you have between those two individuals, right?
Right. We narrowed down by a time period.
So there were some deletions from the charts made this week, right?
I guess so.
When you say narrowed down, some things were cut?
Yes.
And so for Mr. Cohen and Mr. Davidson, there's about page and a half of calls cut from 2018, right?
I don't know from the top of my head.
Let me think about the best way to do this. I want to show you what's been marked for identification as Defense P1. Mr. Bernick, this is just for the parties, the court, and the witness. If we could flip to the page that has Government Exhibit 337. You see that?
Yes.
If you can hold on 1 second, I think we're having technical difficulty.
Whereupon the defense confers.
This is the government's exhibit list, right? You recognize that?
This is some version of it, yes.
Can we take a look at the first page, please? You see it's dated April 16th, 2024?
Yes.
That's right after the trial started, right?
Yes.
If we can go back to the part that reflects Exhibits 336 and 337, there's Bates ranges in the far right column, right?
Yes.
Those are basically the page numbers that were on this exhibit when it was given to the defense, right?
Yes.
Do you have a hard copy of 336 up there?
I do not.
Can I trouble the government for a hard copy of 337?
Whereupon the people give documents to Mr. Bove, who then gives the document to the court officer to give to the witness, and the witness reviews the document.
People's Exhibit 337 has Bates numbers, and I'll use it to compare. Just a few pages, right?
That's right.
Because some pages were deleted, right?
Yes.
And they're from 2018, correct?
Yes.
And you were here during the cross-examination of Keith Davidson, right?
I was.
And you were here when the defense admitted recordings of conversations between Keith Davidson and Michael Cohen, right?
I was.
And then a subsequent decision was made to delete toll records from the summary chart in 2018?
No, I don't think that's correct.
You don't think that time sequence is correct?
I think the time sequence is correct.
I'm not going to ask you about the purpose. I'm just asking about the time sequence. You were here early this morning when there were some text messages read between Dylan Howard and Gina Rodriguez, right?
Yes.
You admitted a call summary marked Government Exhibit 344 of marked call records of Keith Davidson and Gina Rodriguez, right?
Yes.
That's another exhibit where, this week, a significant number of calls were removed, right?
I don't know about significant, but they were shortened.
3 pages worth?
I don't know off the top of my head.
Mr. Conroy, do you have a copy of 344?
I need the Bates number. Who is it between?
Rodriguez and Davidson.
4,269. Just to try to move along, you remember deleting several pages from 344, correct?
Yes.
Now, you also testified about some call summaries relating to Michael Cohen, correct?
Correct.
And one of the phone numbers that you looked at with respect to Michael Cohen ended in 0144, right?
0114.
That's the attention to detail I was talking about. Thank you. So that's a number that you had to get familiar with because it cut across a bunch of these charts, right?
Yes.
You testified that you also familiarized yourself with the electronic phone evidence that's been presented here at the trial, correct?
Yes.
And that came in through Mr. Dowse, right?
Correct.
And he testified about the contents of 2 cell phones, right?
Yes.
He called them CP1 and CP2. Do you remember that?
Yes.
CPL was associated with the phone number 0114 was his testimony, right?
That's correct.
And you looked at those, the data extracted from those phones to help prepare the summaries, right?
Yes.
Do you recall what that IMEI number was associated with? You can say no with CP1.
It's like a 20-digit code, I don't know.
If we could bring up for the witness, the parties, and the court defense exhibit G10. Go to page 3, please. Do you see it says IMEI labeled at the bottom? It ends in 997431, correct?
Correct.
So that's the IMEI associated with the device Mr. Dowse talked about as CP1, right?
That's my understanding, yes.
He said it had the number ending 0114, correct?
Correct.
If we could take a look at government 319, it's in evidence. Everybody can look at this one. You remember some testimony about this? It's a screenshot of a text message, right?
Yes.
The president wants to know if you called David Pecker again. Do you see that?
Yes.
At this trial, you're sort of the guardian of the toll records, right?
I don't know if I'd say that, but if you say so.
There are no toll records in evidence that reflect calls between Hope Hicks and David Pecker around this time period. Are there?
I don't think that's true, but I would have to look at the underlying records.
Do you know what they're marked?
It would be in either People's 400 or 401. Hope Hicks wasn't a part of the Verizon records, so it would be in 401.
And there's no call summary chart between the phone calls between Hope Hicks and David Pecker. Is that correct?
That's correct.
The last thing I want to talk about the government exhibit 247, which is in evidence. If you could bring that up, please. Zoom in as best we can. So this is that recording file off the physical device marked CP1, right?
Yes.
And you said based on the file name, there's that timestamp time field that it is dated September 6th, 2016.
Yes, that's the timestamp.
And then we looked at government exhibit 400 for a call that you said came in around this time?
Around the time that the recording ended.
And so if we could bring up government exhibit 400 with the Bates ending 2726, please. If we could ask the government to do this so we could have the right redactions. This can be for everybody. We can zoom in on rows 26, 91, and 92, please. Mr. Conroy asked you some questions about the second one, 26192, right?
Uh-huh, yes.
But the one above it, 26191, is related, correct?
It's the same call.
It's the call that goes to a voicemail, right?
The first one.
Objection.
Overruled.
26191 is a missed call that goes to a voicemail, reflected in 26192, correct?
That's not my understanding.
Were you here this morning when Mr. Dixon testified?
Yeah, can I explain?
I'm just going to ask you some questions.
Yes, I understand.
You can be questioned again by Mr. Conroy. You were here when he testified, correct?
Yes.
I asked him some questions on the feature call on the right.
Yes.
You see where it says VM?
Yes.
For voicemail?
Yes.
That's the way he explained it, correct?
Yes.
That's what he said?
Yes.
So this call then, the call reflected in 26192, according to Mr. Dixon's testimony, reflects a voicemail, does it not?
If that's what he said, I don't want to testify to something I'm not an expert in.
But you were here when he said VM means voicemail, right?
Yes.
If we could zoom out, please, just to get oriented. The 3 columns there, the right side, there's a field that says IMEI, right?
Yes.
If we could zoom in on the IMEI column of this whole page, please. You were here when Mr. Dixon said the IMEI is the number associated with the physical device itself, right?
Yes. I think you're blowing up the wrong column, but that is my understanding also. Sorry.
Thank you. Do we have the IMEI up now?
Yes.
So you were here when Mr. Dixon said this IMEI number is the number associated with the physical device itself, right?
Yes.
So this IMEI associated with the 2 calls, the missed call, and the voicemail that we just talked about ends 4913, right?
That's correct.
You just reminded us, did you not, that the IMEI associated with the CP1 phone ends 4731?
That's correct.
So it's a different device, right?
That's right.
So it's a voicemail, correct?
If you say so.
Well, it's...
Yes.
You were here when Mr. Dixon said it, right?
Yes.
So it's a voicemail to a different physical device than the one Mr. Dowse testified about, right?
To a different physical device, yes.
Nothing further, Judge.
Thank you. Any redirect?
Just a few questions. I just want to talk first about the summary charts that you did. All of the calls on those charts are in evidence in other places, is that right?
Yes.
Does that include the calls that Mr. Bove was talking about, that when we cut down on the charts, those calls are all still in evidence, correct?
Yes.
Why, if you know, why were those 9 exhibits shortened?
My understanding is that the decision was always going to be that we would admit the parts of the call summaries that were related to what had come out in trial. That's the point of doing summary charts. We're pretty far down the road now, so we made decisions about which parts of them to include.
And you were asked a couple of questions about the fact that you knew that the original summary charts had been turned over to the defense, is that right?
Yes.
And you know that the new versions had also been turned over to the defense, right?
That's correct.
And were you aware that there was no objection to those charts coming into evidence?
Yes.
If we could pull up what we were just looking at, the page from People's 400 with the Bates ending 2726, if we could pull up the same 2 lines we were just looking at, 26191 and 92, I believe earlier, or just a minute or two ago on cross-examination, there was something you wanted to explain about what you saw in this call that interrupted the call that's in evidence as 246. Can you explain that for us?
Sure. So, Mr. Bove, asked me if these were 2 related calls and if the first one was a missed call. My understanding is this was one call that had 2 legs. I'm not sure exactly where it went. But this is how AT&T reported a single call that hit multiple stop points through their system before being connected. That was the clarification.
Okay, if you know, do people sometimes get new phones and keep the same phone number?
I do.
Meaning you do get a new phone and keep the same phone number?
Yes.
I have nothing further, thank you.
Mr. Bove?
Yes, just briefly, if we could just bring that back up on the screen. The significance of this call is that the recording from the phone's CP1 cut off, right?
Correct.
Cuts off mid-conversation, correct?
I don't know if it cut off mid-conversation or at the end of the conversation.
It cuts off at some point in the conversation, right?
It ends.
Right. And it ends before the president is done speaking to Mr. Cohen, correct?
Objection.
Sustained.
You just gave, essentially, what is a hypothesis about these 2 calls on the screens, right?
I'm just describing the timestamps on the calls.
But you're not accounting for what's on the right side that says voicemail?
I don't think that's true. I apologize. I don't think I'm not accounting for it. I mean, the significance of the call is the timestamp.
Well, that's part of the significance. The other part is whether or not the phone call was actually answered.
Not necessarily. I'm not sure if the recording would have actually cut off whether it was answered or not. Could have been it just came in, cut off automatically. I don't know.
Right. You were here during Mr. Dowse's testimony, correct?
Yes.
You were here when I asked him. You could not do any forensic analysis to determine the interplay between an incoming call and the voice recording data, right?
Objection.
Sustained.
You are aware the recording cuts off, and that's why you were looking for a toll like this?
Yes.
Nothing further.
Anything else?
Nothing further.
Thank you, sir. You can step down.
Whereupon the witness is excused.
People, is that it for today?
Yes, Judge.
All right, jurors, we're going to stop at this time. Before I excuse you, I am required to give you these admonition. I remind you to please not talk either among yourselves or with anyone else about anything related to the case. Please continue to keep an open mind. Do not form or express an opinion about the defendant's guilt or innocence until all the evidence is in. I have given my final instructions on the law, and I have directed you to begin deliberations. Do not request, accept, agree to accept or discuss with any person the receipt or acceptance of any benefit or payment in return for supplying information concerning the trial.
Whereupon the defense confers.
Are you done?
Sorry.
Report directly to me any incident within your knowledge or attempt by anyone to improperly influence you or any member of the jury. Do not visit or view any of the locations discussed in the testimony. Do not use any program or electronic device to search for and view any location discussed in the testimony. Do not read nor listen to any accounts or discussions related to the case. That includes the reading or the listening to the reading of any transcripts in the trial or the reading of posts on any court sites. Do not attempt to research any fact, issue, or law related to the case. Do not communicate with anyone about the case by any means, including by telephone, text messages, telephone, or the Internet. Do not Google or search for any information about the case, the law which applies to the case, or the people involved in the case. Have a good weekend. See you Monday at 9:30.
All rise, whereupon the jurors and the alternate jurors are excused.
Please be seated. Mr. Blanche, I was going to ask the people if I could have a copy of People's 350. I think it would be helpful to the court in preparing the jury charges. I wanted to ask if there's any objection to my receiving that now.
May I just have one moment?
Sure.
Whereupon the defense confers.
Was that the number of the document chart, 350?
Yes, Judge.
Whereupon the defense confers.
Your Honor, we're fine with that.
Okay.
On the same topic, our intention was to submit it to the court, as the court might have some proposed charges as well. There's certainly no objection to the court reviewing that.
Thank you. I appreciate that. That was going to be my next thing. You should feel free to start submitting any special instructions that you want. We will definitely have a pre-charge conference at the appropriate time. I will make my final decisions then. You can start bringing matters to my attention now if you like. Tell me about scheduling for next week.
We expect to call
2 witnesses.
Yes, potentially 2 witnesses, and I think it's entirely possible that we will rest by the end of next week.
Okay, all right.
Also, there was one other evidentiary matter that Mr. Conroy wanted to raise with the court, if this is a good time.
Sure, it is.
This relates to an exhibit numbered People's 79, which is a copy of a severance agreement for Alan Weisselberg. We've had, I think, some conversation with counsel about this. My understanding, but I'm sure they'll let me know if I'm wrong, is that while they object to it coming into evidence, if Your Honor finds it admissible, they will not. We will not need to call a witness to put it in. Is that accurate? It's sort of a relevance objection.
Right. We just want to resolve our other legal objections. It will come in authenticity-wise subject to the court's ruling.
Can I take a look at it?
Sure. Actually, Your Honor, I'll hand up a copy of the chart that's in evidence as 350 with that as well.
Thank you. Mr. Bove, what's your objection?
Judge, this is the separation agreement between the Trump Organization and Mr. Weisselberg. Mr. Weisselberg's absence from this trial is a very complicated issue. I wouldn't be surprised if there ends up being a foundation for a missing witness instruction about the uncalled witnesses being equally unavailable to both sides. His posture in this trial is as a hearsay declarant, which the government is using basically in that capacity as a witness. Their theory is he conspired, I think, with Mr. Cohen, that he gave instructions to Mr. McConney. He is in that way, I submit, an uncalled government witness. To offer this agreement, which I think would be offered as a way to sort of impeach their own hearsay declarant and suggest there's some kind of bias and motive that he has to either not be here or acting in a certain way, raises a number of complexities in light of Mr. Weisselberg's overall situation. We think it's unduly prejudicial, and it's not particularly relevant, especially in a situation where they are offering, where the government is offering his statements. I think this would look differently if we had sought to offer hearsay from him. That's not what we were doing.
So it's a hearsay objection?
Not quite, because as I said, just to make sure there's no business records hearsay objection, if Your Honor overrules this right now, we're going to stipulate. Our objection is to relevance and undue prejudice. We don't think it's relevant that he entered into this agreement after the fact, and we think it's unduly prejudicial and confusing in light of the fact that Mr. Weisselberg is in prison right now and not available to anyone.
So I understand the relevance of the objection. Help me understand the undue prejudice objection a little bit more.
As a result of Mr. Weisselberg's legal situation, I think that he would likely. If either side tried to call him, he would likely invoke. We are not able to elicit testimony because of those circumstances. We're not able to elicit testimony that would potentially impeach some of the hearsay that has been offered. And I think the government is probably in a similar situation. He is, in effect, their witness at this trial as a hearsay declarant. In that way, we don't think the government is able to impeach their own hearsay declarant, even in this form of impeachment, that he entered into a settlement agreement after the fact based on a host of situations that we don't think is relevant at this trial. We think those two considerations require that this not come in because of the confusion it would add.
Thanks. People?
Judge, as the court is aware there has been, there probably will be more discussion of Mr. Weisselberg and various things related to him in the case, And what we are looking to do is explain, from our perspective, why he's not here. I am sure there will be arguments made by counsel about whether he should have been here and what not being here means. I think we need this agreement. Our view is that Mr. Weisselberg's interests right now are very aligned with the defendants. I think this agreement points that out. Among other things, there are 3 payments due Mr. Weisselberg during this calendar year for $250,000 each, one in June, one in September, and one in December. Also, if you take a look at the agreement, particularly in Section 3, Employee Promises, in 3B, Employee promises not to verbally or in writing disparage, criticize, or denigrate the company or any of its current or former entities, directors, managers, employees, owners, or representatives. In Sub D, under 3, the employee promises that, except for acts or testimony directly compelled by subpoena or other lawful process issued by a court of competent jurisdiction, he will not communicate with, provide information to, or otherwise cooperate in any way with any other person or entity, including his counsel or other agents having or claiming to have any adverse claims against the company, or any person or entity released by this agreement with regard to the adverse claims, or to take any action to induce, encourage, instigate, aid, abet, or otherwise cause any person or entity to bring or file a complaint, charge, lawsuit, or other proceeding of any kind against the company or any person or entity released by this agreement. Those are just a couple of the provisions. And counsel referred to trying to impeach his credibility. We're not trying to do that. What we're trying to do is explain his absence. I think, or I would submit, that this agreement offers a real explanation for why he is not going to be here in this trial.
We just respectfully disagree with that. This agreement is not the reason that Mr. Weisselberg is not at this trial. Jeff McConney has a substantial similar agreement that is in evidence, but he testified at this trial, and his availability or lack thereof is much more straightforward, has similar terms. Nobody tried to invoke that agreement to prevent him from testifying. That's just not the case. That's not the reason Mr. Weisselberg is not here. The reason Mr. Weisselberg is not a witness to either side is because the district attorney's office initiated a perjury prosecution in the lead-up to this case. Even that sentence, I know, is a very complicated sentence, Judge. My point is, to get into any of this, it would all have to come out. It's just a rabbit hole that I think is unnecessary for, and it is being offered to impeach Mr. Weisselberg. It's being offered to show a bias and a motive that the government's own hearsay declarant, they're saying, has. It's a much more complicated situation than that. For those reasons, we don't think it's relevant. And if it is, it should not come in because of the prejudice.
Very quickly, Judge, with respect to Mr. McConney, I believe he's gotten all of his payments and his agreement has sort of ended. The other thing I would say is, if counsel prefers, we would be willing to stipulate that Mr. Weisselberg is in jail for perjury if that solves the problem.
I think that would be one way to solve the problem. My question is, has anyone attempted to get him to come in some way by serving him with a subpoena or, in other words, try to compel his testimony?
Judge, the people have not.
And have you? You have an obligation.
No.
You referred to how both sides are having difficulty with this issue.
If I said it that way, I miss. My point is, I think there's an equally shared access issue. They have chosen to call or not call him. We obviously have no burden here. We have not taken steps to try and call him at this trial. It's just, it would not resolve the situation if we stipulated that he was in prison for perjury. I think it actually further supports my point, which is there are a host of reasons that Mr. Weisselberg is not going to be a witness in this case. They, the government, have chosen to not take steps to call him. It's a very complicated situation. It's not completely explained by this document. It would be misleading to allow this document in by itself. It would be further prejudicial. I'm not suggesting Your Honor is requiring for us to stipulate to some negotiated statement about the perjury situation, and we think that all of this is sort of a sideshow for somebody that is the government's hearsay declarant, who they shouldn't be permitted to impeach in the first place.
The last thing. Hopefully the last thing, it's not that it's the reason, but it's a reason, and it's a significant reason that helps explain why he's not here.
I think it would be helpful to me making my decision if I could see that some efforts were taken to compel his appearance. I don't have to do this right now, right?
No.
Let me think about it. Right now, it seems to me that we're kind of trying to jump the gun. We want to explain why he's not here without having made every effort to get him here, Section 3, C. Actually, it's 3, D. It says, except for acts or testimony directly compelled by subpoena or other lawful process issued by a court of competent jurisdiction. It seems to me, if I'm understanding correctly, that that step has not yet been taken. Not that it has to be taken. It's a factor for me in making this decision.
Can I just say one thing on that, Judge?
Sure.
While it's true that we could subpoena him and put him up there cold, the agreement seems to preclude us from talking to him or him talking to us at the risk of losing $750,000 of outstanding severance pay. So, while it is theoretically our prerogative to try to subpoena him, put him up, and see if he would take the Fifth Amendment in real time, but do this cold I don't think is really the entire point. Even if it's relevant, I don't think it's the entire point. I think that agreement has a very palpable connection to why that could be an exercise in futility or a strategically bad decision to put a witness on the stand who is under an agreement like that.
Right. I think one way to possibly deal with that is to do it out of the presence of the jury and put him on the stand. He can have counsel present. He can be asked a few questions and he can say, I'm not going to answer the questions. And then we can go through the steps that are required for me to find that he's either unavailable or unwilling to testify.
We could do that, Judge, but then we would still be under the situation of calling the witness to the stand who's under no obligation with us.
Right. Then it would be on the record, and I've seen it.
Right.
Right now, we're speculating. We're speculating he would honor an agreement. We're speculating the degree to which this agreement dictates he could not speak to you. We're speculating to the advice he may or may not be given by counsel. It's difficult to rule like that.
I want to make one last point because we're contemplating a lot of process around this. Mr. Weisselberg has never been on the government's witness list. So to suddenly try and create this procedure to get around a way to admit this document, I think we were procedurally barred this morning from offering an exhibit. I think there are procedural problems with trying to add him to the witness list at this point as well.
I don't see what one thing has to do with the other. We're not creating any procedure. This is done. This is done with some frequency. I've had people produced from jail testify. I've had other people who were unwilling to testify. But the only way to know that is to put them on the stand, out of the presence of the jury, on the record, under oath.
My point is slightly different, is that even if Mr. Weisselberg came to this trial and was now willing to testify for any number of reasons he might decide to, we were entitled to notice of that long before this trial started. That's the point I was making.
Did you think there was a possibility that at some point the people might call Alan Weisselberg to testify?
Not based on the witness list, no.
Is there anything else?
No, thank you.
Your Honor, we have an application with respect to Mr. Cohen. We've been pushing the court at the risk of stating the obvious regarding the gag order. Mr. Cohen continues to speak publicly about this trial and about President Trump. As recently as, I believe, Wednesday night, he was on TikTok, this time talking extensively about. He was wearing a white t-shirt with a picture of President Trump behind bars, wearing an orange jumpsuit, and discussing about how he's now announcing he's running for Congress. Our request is, now that we have 1 week left in the trial, that he be prohibited from talking, the same way President Trump is. The case law speaks to Your Honor having the power to do this. Shepard v. Maxwell explicitly states, there may be instances where the court not only needs to stop extrajudicial statements from the parties and the lawyers, but also from the witnesses or court officials. Your Honor, it's Friday. We have a couple of days left. It's becoming a problem every single day that President Trump is not allowed to respond to this witness, but this witness is allowed to continue to talk. He has stated on social media that he's going to stop talking a couple of different times, and he doesn't. So our request is that the court order the government to instruct the witness to not talk about President Trump or this case until the case is over.
Mr. Steinglass?
Judge, we have repeatedly instructed all of the witnesses in this case, to the extent that we have any control over it, to refrain from making public statements. The fact of the matter is, we have no control over what they do. We have repeatedly asked the witnesses not to do that. Not just Mr. Cohen, all the witnesses. The fact of the matter is, these witnesses are not subject to the gag order, and we have no remedy if they engage in those activities. So all we can do, if Mr. Blanche is asking the court to order the people to order the witnesses not to do something, we have already done that. Or to the extent that we have already asked, we have no power to order. And there's nothing really more to say about that.
It might be a little bit of a new answer, but I would direct the people to communicate to Mr. Cohen that the judge is asking him to refrain from making any more statements about this case, about Mr. Trump, or about anything related to this case or the process. That comes from the bench and that you are communicating that on behalf of the bench.
We will do so. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you. I'll see you Monday.